Medieval hygiene, the struggle for cleanliness. To the unsung heroes of the medieval era, the cooks who bravely faced down the rancid realities of their larders, the laundresses who wrestled with grime in the absence of effective detergents, the perfumers who masked a multitude of sins with heady scents, and to every individual who, despite a profound lack of modern conveniences, valiantly attempted to maintain a semblance of cleanliness in a world that often conspired against them. This book is dedicated to your enduring struggle against the great medieval stink, a struggle as much about societal norms, medical misconceptions, and economic realities as it was about soap and water. You lived in a time when the very air hung heavy with the aromas of rotting refuse, unwashed bodies, and the ever present fear of pestilence. Yet, you persisted, finding creative and often ingenious ways to navigate a world where a simple bath was a luxury, and the line between acceptable odor and outright stench was often blurred. Your methods might seem bizarre to modern sensibilities, your understanding of hygiene deeply flawed by the standards of today, but your efforts, however unconventional, offer a poignant reminder of the human drive to maintain dignity and comfort, even in the face of overwhelming odds. This dedication is not simply a nod to historical accuracy. It's an acknowledgement of your resilience, your resourcefulness, and your surprising humor. Your stories, etched in the annals of history through snippets of texts, whispered accounts, and the very physical landscape of your settlements, continue to intrigue and amaze. To decipher your ingenious, if sometimes questionable, hygiene methods is to gain a deeper appreciation not only for the evolution of cleanliness, but also for the remarkable adaptability and enduring spirit of the human race. Your legacy is far more than just a fascinating historical footnote. It is a testament to the enduring human endeavor for a cleaner, healthier life, a life that even amidst overwhelming challenges strived for a little less stink and a little more dignity. Your efforts, though often far from effective by today's standards, are truly worthy of commemoration. This book is a small attempt to honor your dedication to cleanliness in a time when clean was far, far more than merely a simple concept. Chapter 1: The Great Medieval Stink. Imagine, if you will, stepping back in time, not to some romanticized vision of noble knights and damsels in distress, but to the grimy, pungent reality of 14th century London. Picture yourself standing in the heart of a bustling marketplace, the air thick with the cacophony of human voices, the bleating of sheep, the hawking of wares. But before the sounds register fully, it's the smell that hits you first. A wave of olfactory assault, so intense it threatens to knock you off your feet. This isn't the subtle, vaguely unpleasant aroma of a modern city street after the garbage truck has passed. No, this is something far, far worse. This is the great medieval stink, a symphony of putrescence that permeates every cobbled street, every timber-framed house, every crevice of human existence. It's a smell that burrows into your nostrils, coating your throat, clinging to the back of your tongue like a tenacious parasite. The first notes of this olfactory nightmare are the sweet, sickly stench of overflowing cesspools. These weren't the discreet underground systems we take for granted today. Medieval cesspools were often open, festering pits, strategically, or perhaps more accurately, strategically placed in the middle of streets and alleyways. Their contents, a revolting cocktail of human waste, rotting food scraps, and God knows what else, seeped into the ground, leaving a permanent stain on the very fabric of the city. Imagine the texture, the viscous ooze, bubbling slowly under a layer of flies, their buzzing a constant, maddening soundtrack to the stench. This bass note is then layered with the acrid tang of animal waste. Horses, oxen, pigs, chickens, they all shared the narrow streets with the human inhabitants, leaving behind a generous bounty of droppings. Remember, these weren't domesticated pets confined to neat little gardens. These were working animals, essential to the city's functioning, their dung adding a pungent, earthy undercurrent to the already potent aroma. Picture it, a slippery, treacherous path of manure and discarded offal, making even the most cautious traveler wary of every step. Then, of course, there are the people themselves. The concept of daily bathing was largely alien to most medieval city dwellers. Water was scarce, precious, and often seen as a potential source of disease. The idea of cleansing the body was less about hygiene and more about spiritual purity, an act performed infrequently, often associated with religious rituals or significant life events. So, the unwashed bodies of thousands crammed together in overcrowded houses and streets contributed their own unique blend to the great city's stink. A combination of sweat, dirt, and body oils that clung to their clothes and their skin. Picture the layers of clothing, rarely washed, becoming a breeding ground for bacteria and parasites, slowly decomposing with the wearer. The smell of rotting food adds another dimension to this olfactory hellscape. Meat, vegetables, bread, it all spoiled quickly without refrigeration. Stalls overflowed with produce past its prime, attracting swarms of flies and rats that scurried through the muck and debris, leaving a trail of contamination wherever they went. The pervasive smell of decay permeated everything, a constant reminder of mortality and the fragility of life in a time without reliable sanitation. Add to this the pervasive scent of tanneries, where animal hides were processed, emitting a pungent, chemical tang that lingered in the air for days. Combine that with the aroma of the countless open sewers that snaked through the city, carrying away the waste, or more often, simply letting it stagnate and fester, and the picture becomes complete. The great medieval stink wasn't merely a smell, it was a palpable presence, a suffocating blanket that covered the city like a shroud. Imagine trying to navigate this environment. The sheer volume of smells, the sharp, piercing scent of urine mingling with the cloying sweetness of decaying vegetables, the metallic tang of blood from a butcher's stall intermingling with the musty odor of damp earth and rotting wood would be overwhelming, even for the most seasoned resident. One can almost taste the grit and grime clinging to the back of the throat. It's crucial to emphasize that this wasn't simply a matter of personal hygiene. The lack of sanitation had a direct impact on public health. Disease spread easily in these conditions, and epidemics were a constant threat. The stench itself wasn't simply unpleasant, it was a tangible indicator of the underlying problems of poverty, overcrowding, and inadequate sanitation that plagued medieval cities. It was a physical manifestation of the social and economic inequalities that shaped daily life. The sensory experience was not limited to the nose. The eyes encountered a similar assault. The streets were awash in a mire of mud, animal dung, and human refuse, adding to the overwhelming impression of squalor and decay. Rats scurried through the filth, leaving their marks in the omnipresent stench. The clothes of the people were often tattered, dirty, and stained with the byproducts of their daily lives. The soundscape further amplified the visceral experience. The rasping cough of a sick person, the cries of vendors advertising their wares, the din of the crowd. The textures were equally grim, a kaleidoscope of grimy cobblestones, slippery mud, and decaying organic matter. To fully grasp the intensity of the medieval stink, one needs to understand that it wasn't just an occasional inconvenience, it was a pervasive reality, shaping every aspect of life. It affected social interactions, economic activities, and the very perceptions of health and well-being. It was a constant reminder of the precarious nature of existence in a time long before modern sanitation and hygiene practices. So, while romantic notions of the Middle Ages often prevail, let's not forget the reality of life, a reality that was for many deeply and profoundly unpleasant. This wasn't merely a lack of soap, it was a societal structure that made cleanliness a near impossible dream for most, a stark contrast to our modern preoccupation with hygiene. The great medieval stink is not just a historical curiosity, it's a powerful illustration of the challenges of life in a time before modern sanitation, a lesson that reminds us of the simple luxuries we often take for granted. Now, having established the pervasive stench that permeated medieval life, let's delve into one of the most significant misconceptions surrounding hygiene: the fear of water itself. Contrary to our modern understanding, where regular bathing is considered essential for health, the medieval populace often viewed water with suspicion, even outright fear. This wasn't simply a matter of inconvenience. It was a deeply ingrained belief rooted in the prevailing medical theories and societal practices of the time. To understand the great medieval stink, we must understand the medieval attitude towards water, or more accurately, the avoidance of it. The humoral theory of medicine, dominant throughout the Middle Ages, provided the framework for this perspective. This theory posited that the human body contained four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health was believed to depend on the balance of these humors, and illness resulted from an imbalance. Water, according to this theory, was seen as a disruptive force, capable of upsetting this delicate equilibrium. Think of it this way. Imagine your body as a finely tuned musical instrument. Each humor is a string, and their harmonious interplay produces a beautiful melody. Health. Water, in this analogy, is a clumsy hand that plucks at the strings haphazardly, jarring them out of tune and creating dissonance. Illness. This wasn't simply a metaphorical interpretation. It held profound consequences for daily routines and perceptions of hygiene. One of the key arguments against frequent bathing was the belief that water opened the pores of the skin, making the body vulnerable to disease. The theory suggested that the pores, once opened, allowed the entry of miasmas, harmful vapors believed to cause illness. This wasn't just an abstract concept, it fueled a practical avoidance of water. Washing, therefore, was not seen as a way to improve hygiene, but ironically, as a potential health hazard. This fear was further amplified by the quality of water available during the medieval period. Unlike our modern treated water supplies, medieval water sources were often contaminated with sewage and other impurities. Rivers and streams, the primary sources of water for many, served as open sewers, carrying away human and animal waste directly into the water supply. Wells, while seemingly cleaner, were often susceptible to contamination from the surrounding environment. This tangible reality played a significant role in shaping the perception of water as a dangerous substance. The logic wasn't entirely flawed, albeit vastly incomplete. Contaminated water was a vector for disease, and the medieval lack of understanding of microorganisms meant they could not make the distinction between clean and contaminated water. The notion of catching a chill also played a significant role in the aversion to water. The medieval understanding of health was deeply connected to the concept of maintaining a proper internal temperature, aligning with the humoral balance theory. It was believed that washing, especially with cold water, could disrupt this internal balance, leading to illness. Therefore, many preferred to limit their exposure to water, particularly during colder months, fearing the detrimental effects on their internal equilibrium. This wasn't a matter of simple discomfort. It was a genuine health concern based on the prevalent medical understanding. This belief further impacted bathing practices, transforming what we today consider a routine hygiene act into a rare, even ritualistic event. Rather than frequent cleansing, many people opted for partial washing, focusing only on specific body parts or relying on less water-intensive methods of cleaning. The use of cloths, dampened with various solutions, like vinegar or herbal infusions, became more common than submerging the entire body in water. These practices might seem rudimentary today, but they reflected a deliberate attempt to balance cleanliness with the perceived dangers of water. The infrequency of bathing extended beyond practical concerns to social and economic ones. Access to water, particularly clean water, was not evenly distributed across society. Those in the lower classes often lacked access to clean water sources, making regular bathing a luxury they could not afford. Even for those with access to water, heating sufficient amounts for bathing was often impractical, requiring considerable resources, time, and energy, a precious commodity in a society where survival was a daily struggle. The lack of widespread bathing had visible societal consequences. Clothing, often made of wool or linen, was rarely washed, becoming increasingly soiled over time. Body odors, a natural byproduct of the human body, were not effectively mitigated, adding to the overall stench of medieval communities. This was not a matter of personal negligence. It was a direct outcome of the cultural beliefs and the prevailing medical understanding of the time. This is not to say bathing was entirely absent. Bathing was, for many, a seasonal event, perhaps once or twice a year. often linked to religious observances or significant life transitions. These occasions were not necessarily aimed at personal hygiene in the modern sense, but rather served symbolic or spiritual purposes. The association between purification and religious ritual points to the profound cultural significance of these infrequent baths. Furthermore, medieval perceptions of water extended beyond concerns about bathing. Drinking water, too, was approached with caution. The prevailing belief in miasmas led people to favor drinks like wine or ale, believing them to be healthier and more purifying than water. This preference wasn't necessarily based on a dislike of water's taste, but on the belief that it carried disease-causing vapors. Ale and wine, through fermentation, were seen as having some purifying properties, effectively cleansing the body of harmful elements. This was another example of a practical choice based on the prevailing medical understanding and social realities of the time. To fully appreciate the medieval perspective, we must move beyond the simple equation of lack of water, suost and poor hygiene. The medieval understanding of cleanliness, health, and the role of water was fundamentally different from our own. Their beliefs, grounded in the humoral theory and shaped by the realities of their environment, resulted in practices that today might seem appalling, but were entirely rational within the context of their time. The great medieval stink, therefore, is not merely a testament to a lack of sanitation, but a powerful illustration of a radically different worldview, a worldview that shaped not only their hygiene practices, but their perceptions of health, disease, and the world around them. It underscores the importance of considering historical context when evaluating practices that, from a modern perspective, may seem unimaginable or even repulsive. The absence of modern sanitation systems and a flawed understanding of disease transmission, coupled with deeply rooted cultural beliefs, created a perfect storm of conditions, leading to the pervasive, inescapable stench of medieval life. The pervasive stink wasn't simply the absence of our modern ways. It was an outcome of a different and deeply held set of beliefs. This historical perspective allows us to see the great medieval stink not merely as a historical curiosity, but as a window into a different way of understanding the world, a world where the very concept of cleanliness differed dramatically from our modern understandings. Now, let's turn our attention to the olfactory landscape of the medieval world, a world where the pervasive stench of unwashed bodies was at least partially countered by the pervasive use of perfume. While modern readers might associate perfume with luxury and self-expression, in the medieval era, it served a far more practical, if less aesthetically pleasing, purpose: odor control. Forget the delicate floral notes and subtle musks of today. Medieval perfume was a potent concoction often employed as a desperate attempt to combat the ever-present stink. Imagine walking down a medieval street. The stench of rotting garbage, animal dung, and unwashed bodies would hit you like a physical blow. Yet, amidst this olfactory onslaught, a different kind of aroma, often cloying and heavy, would frequently cut through the general miasma. This was the scent of perfume, a perfume far removed from the refined fragrances we know today. These weren't the delicate, layered scents of modern perfumery. These were strong, often pungent, mixtures designed to overwhelm rather than complement the body odor they aimed to mask. The ingredients of these medieval perfumes were as diverse and sometimes bizarre as the smells they sought to conquer. The base of many perfumes was often alcohol, obtained from fermented grains or wine. This acted as a solvent, dissolving and carrying the other aromatic ingredients. However, the real stars of the show were the various herbs, spices, and resins that gave each perfume its unique and often overpowering fragrance. Consider the humble rose, beloved in many modern perfumes for its delicate fragrance. In the medieval period, roses were not just used for their beauty. Their petals and the essential oils extracted from them were key components of many perfumes, imparting a strong floral scent that was far more intense than anything available today. Roses, however, were far from the only floral ingredient. Other flowers like lavender, violets, and lilies, all readily available in medieval gardens or the wild, added their own unique scents to the aromatic mix. Beyond the flowers, a whole host of other ingredients contributed to the characteristic aroma of medieval perfumes. Spices like cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg, prized for their exotic origins and pungent scents, were often added to perfume recipes. These spices, besides their masking properties, also held symbolic value. Cinnamon, for example, was associated with warmth and spirituality, adding another layer of meaning to the perfumes beyond their mere practical function. Resins also played a vital role. Frankincense and myrrh, imported from the East, were valued not only for their intense aromas, but also for their religious significance, contributing to the perfume's potential spiritual connotations. Ambergris, a rare and precious substance found in the intestines of sperm whales, was also highly prized for its musky, sweet scent. Its scarcity naturally placed it within the reach of only the wealthy. These exotic ingredients lent an air of luxury and exclusivity to the perfume, highlighting the social status of those who could afford them. Beyond these relatively common ingredients, some medieval perfumes contained rather more unusual components. Various animal products, for instance, found their way into some recipes. Musk, derived from the musk deer, provided a powerful, long-lasting, and notoriously pungent aroma used as a base note in many perfumes. Civet, derived from the civet cat, was another popular ingredient, contributing a complex and distinctly animalistic scent. The use of such materials underscores the medieval preoccupation with strong, powerful scents designed to overcome the prevalent odors of the era. The preparations of medieval perfumes was far from the sterile, precisely measured process of modern perfumery. Recipes varied considerably across regions and social classes. Some were simple concoctions, easily made at home using readily available ingredients, while others were complex mixtures requiring rare and expensive ingredients. The methods of preparation were often passed down through generations or shared within specific guilds or social circles. The preparation process itself was integral to the meaning and status associated with the perfume. The social implications of perfume use were significant in medieval society. While everyone from the peasantry to the nobility used perfumes to some degree, the ingredients, quality, and quantity used varied considerably according to social standing. The nobility, with access to rare and expensive ingredients like ambergris and imported spices, could afford complex and sophisticated perfumes. These perfumes, often applied generously, would have created a kind of olfactory halo around them, subtly, or not so subtly, signaling their superior social standing. The peasantry, on the other hand, relied on more readily available and simpler recipes. These perfumes, while still serving the practical function of masking body odor, were less potent and less complex than those used by the elite. The herbs and flowers they used were often locally sourced, and the preparation was simpler, reflecting their more modest means. The very act of wearing perfume was also linked to social status. The way perfume was applied, the quantity used, and even the specific vessels used to store and apply it communicated social position. The wealthy might carry elaborate, delicately crafted perfume bottles made of precious metals or glass, while the less affluent might use simpler containers made of clay or wood. The act of applying perfume was itself a ritualistic performance, reinforcing the wearer's social role and status. The cost of perfume varied considerably, depending on the ingredients used. The most expensive perfumes, containing rare and exotic ingredients, were a luxury affordable only by the wealthiest members of society. These perfumes served as a visual and olfactory declaration of wealth and status, a tangible symbol of the wearer's position in society. In conclusion, perfume in the medieval period was far more than just a pleasant scent. It was a crucial element in navigating the pervasive stench of medieval life. It was a practical tool, a social marker, and for some, a reflection of religious or spiritual beliefs. The complex mix of ingredients, the preparation methods, and the social implications of its use all contribute to a richer understanding of the medieval world, a world where the battle against body odor was fought not just with soap and water, infrequently used as we have seen, but with the powerful, pungent, and often bizarre scents of medieval perfumes. The very idea of a perfumed medieval landscape adds another layer to the image of medieval life, challenging our modern perceptions and highlighting the practical and surprisingly sophisticated ways in which people tried to manage their personal hygiene. The great medieval stink is then not simply a story of neglect, but also one of ingenuity and adaptation, a testament to human creativity in the face of challenging circumstances. The use of perfume, far from being an indulgence, was a significant part of the medieval tapestry of daily life, reflecting the society's values, priorities, and the stark realities of its time. Now, having explored the pungent perfume-laden world that masked the pervasive odors of medieval life, let's delve into a subject that might seem, at first glance, contradictory: the surprisingly infrequent act of bathing. While our modern selves might recoil at the thought of foregoing regular showers or baths, for the medieval populace, such ablutions were far from a daily or even weekly routine. The rare bath, when it did occur, was less a matter of hygiene in our modern understanding and more of a ritual, a significant event, often tied to specific occasions or religious observances. The image of the perpetually grimy medieval peasant is a somewhat exaggerated caricature, born from a confluence of historical misconceptions and a lack of understanding of the practical realities of life in the Middle Ages. The idea of frequent bathing wasn't simply a matter of personal preference. It was constrained by a web of complex social, economic, and logistical factors that rendered regular bathing an impractical, even unattainable luxury for the vast majority of the population. Firstly, let's consider the simple logistics of procuring water. In a time before readily accessible running water, obtaining sufficient water for a bath required significant effort. Water had to be hauled from wells, rivers, or streams, a labor-intensive process that was especially challenging in rural areas where water sources might be located at considerable distances from homes. The sheer volume of water required for a full-body immersion made it a considerable undertaking, even for the relatively wealthy. Consider the physical labor involved, not merely filling a tub, which itself might be a rudimentary affair, but also heating the water, a task that often involved building a fire and using large pots or cauldrons. This wasn't the quick and easy process of turning on a tap. This was a significant expenditure of time and energy, more suitable for a special occasion than a daily chore. Furthermore, the availability of water itself was far from guaranteed. Droughts were not uncommon, and water sources were often shared amongst entire communities, creating competition and rationing during periods of scarcity. Imagine the scene: a long line of people waiting their turn to draw water from a well, their daily tasks and domestic needs competing with the demand for water for a bath. The very notion of using a substantial quantity of water for personal bathing under such circumstances would have been considered wasteful and irresponsible. The cost of fuel for heating water was another significant factor. Wood, the primary fuel source for most of the population, was a valuable commodity, not something to be squandered unnecessarily. Heating enough water for a bath was a costly undertaking, consuming significant amounts of wood, which was itself a precious resource used for heating homes, cooking food, and providing the energy for various crafts and trades. The environmental impact and cost of the fuel for the bath would often outweigh its perceived hygienic benefit. So the great medieval stink was partly a result of a fuel shortage, almost literally. The prevailing societal attitudes toward cleanliness also played a crucial role in the infrequent bathing practices of the era. While modern medicine emphasizes cleanliness as a critical aspect of disease prevention, such an understanding was absent in medieval society. The prevailing theories about disease often centered around miasmas, noxious fumes or bad air, which were believed to cause illness. Consequently, many people believed that bathing opened the pores of the skin, making the body vulnerable to these harmful vapors, increasing the likelihood of disease. The notion of exposure making the body weaker rather than stronger was commonly held, and therefore regular bathing was thought of as potentially hazardous to one's health. This wasn't a matter of laziness or personal hygiene being low on the list of priorities. This was a matter of what was considered the most appropriate response, given the knowledge of the day. This pervasive fear of exposure to the elements and the potential for catching illness was further exacerbated by the poor quality of water in many areas. Untreated water was often contaminated with bacteria, and parasites, making bathing a potentially hazardous practice, especially when the body was believed to be rendered vulnerable by the opening of its pores. This is not to say that the medieval people avoided water entirely. Washing of hands and faces was common, and many people would use water for hygiene purposes, even if a full immersion was rare. However, a full body cleansing by immersion was simply not undertaken as often as many may assume. Furthermore, the social implications of bathing were complex and nuanced. While the nobility and the wealthy might have had access to more resources and could afford the luxury of occasional baths, perhaps a monthly or seasonal ritual, the peasantry rarely bathed in the way that we would today. The rare occasion might coincide with a religious festival or a significant event, turning the act of bathing into a more symbolic ritual than a regular hygiene practice. Cleanliness may have been next to godliness, but bathing was not necessarily viewed as the best path to reach godliness. The religious implications of bathing will be examined in a later chapter. Historical accounts and literary works from the medieval period further corroborate the infrequent bathing practices, while descriptions of lavish baths among the wealthy aristocracy occasionally surface. Detailed narratives of regular bathing among the general populace are largely absent. Literary sources, whilst occasionally describing the discomfort and malodor of life in the medieval period, provide little evidence of daily bathing as a common practice. Such accounts paint a rather different picture of life, a reality where the pungent smells of perfume served not just as a mask for body odor, but also as a social indicator of wealth and status, demonstrating that the frequency of bathing varied greatly depending on economic status. The infrequent nature of bathing in the medieval period thus emerges not simply as a result of a lack of personal hygiene or any disdain for cleanliness, but rather as a product of the complex interplay of practical limitations, prevailing medical beliefs, and deeply ingrained societal norms. The rare medieval bath, when it did occur, was a significant event, an occasion for purification, both physical and spiritual, a far cry from the commonplace routine of modern daily hygiene. And so, the great medieval stink was not simply a result of a lack of bathing, but a complex social, economic, and logistical reality that profoundly shaped the lives of the people of the medieval era. The next section will explore alternative methods of maintaining a semblance of cleanliness in the absence of frequent bathing. Now, having established the infrequent nature of full-body bathing in the Middle Ages, it's time to examine the ingenious, if often unsavory, alternative cleaning methods employed by medieval people to maintain a semblance of cleanliness. While a weekly soak in a tub was a luxury afforded to few, the pursuit of cleanliness, or at least the masking of its absence, was a daily concern across all social strata. The methods were, to put it mildly, unconventional by modern standards, and often involved a curious blend of practicality, superstition, and a healthy dose of ingenuity. Vinegar, that ubiquitous pantry staple of today, held a central place in medieval cleaning routines. Its acidic nature made it a surprisingly effective cleanser for both body and clothes. While we might use it sparingly today to remove stubborn stains, medieval people employed it far more liberally. Diluted vinegar served as a sort of makeshift body wash, used to wipe down skin and cleanse wounds. Its astringent properties provided a feeling of freshness, even if it didn't completely remove grime. Think of it as a very pungent toner for the entire body. The smell, admittedly, was far from pleasant. A sharp, biting aroma that mingled with the already complex olfactory landscape of medieval life. Yet it was far preferable to the alternative, the pervasive, unwashed odor of the unwashed masses. Furthermore, vinegar was a crucial element in laundry practices. Soaking soiled clothes in a solution of vinegar and water helped to loosen dirt and grime, making the task of scrubbing less arduous. Vinegar was also believed to have bleaching properties, helping to brighten fabrics that had become dull from repeated wear and exposure to the elements. Considering the lack of readily available soaps and detergents, vinegar played a critical role in maintaining the few clean garments people possessed. Imagine the monumental task of washing clothes in a time without washing machines, a labor-intensive process that was often done by hand, typically in cold or lukewarm water, with vinegar acting as a vital aid. Beyond vinegar, ashes played a significant role in medieval cleaning routines, particularly in personal hygiene. Wood ash, rich in alkali, possessed mild cleansing properties and served as a kind of rudimentary soap. Mixed with water, it created a mildly abrasive paste that was used to scrub the skin. This wasn't your delicate floral scented body wash. It was a rough and ready exfoliant, capable of removing dirt and even some parasites. Imagine the texture, gritty, coarse, perhaps somewhat irritating to sensitive skin. Yet, for a population accustomed to harsh conditions, this slightly rough treatment was likely considered a tolerable, if not entirely comfortable, alternative to the luxury of soap. Moreover, the use of ash was ecologically sound, recycling a readily available waste product into a cleaning agent. The use of ashes extended beyond personal hygiene. It served as a vital ingredient in laundering clothes as well. The alkaline nature of wood ash helped to cut through grease and dirt, making it an effective natural detergent. Combined with water and possibly vinegar, it created a cleaning solution that, while not producing the fluffy suds of modern detergents, could still improve the cleanliness of garments. The availability of ash, like vinegar, was widespread, making it an accessible cleaning agent for the entire population, regardless of social standing. The process, however, was a physically demanding and time-consuming task. Beyond these common substances, a variety of other ingredients were employed in cleaning routines, reflecting a level of ingenuity often overlooked in discussions of medieval life. Clay, for example, was used to absorb oil and grease, acting as a mild absorbent in both body and clothing care. Various herbs and plants, selected for their purported medicinal and cleansing properties, were often added to water used for washing both bodies and clothes. These often included ingredients with antibacterial and antiseptic properties, reflecting an intuitive understanding of the need to combat infection, even if the underlying scientific principles were unknown. The techniques used in cleaning varied depending on social class. The nobility and wealthy merchants could afford more refined methods, potentially employing specialized servants to attend to their cleaning needs. They may have access to more luxurious imported soaps, though still far less common and more expensive than today. Finely scented oils, and possibly even specialized cleaning tools. Yet, even for the wealthy, the overall approach to cleanliness remained different from our modern expectations. Regular full body washing remained a less frequent occurrence. For the peasantry, the cleaning process was a more challenging affair, largely undertaken within the constraints of their limited resources. The tools they used were simple and rudimentary. Simple scrub brushes made from natural materials, perhaps some cloth scraps used for scrubbing, and basic containers for holding water. Their cleaning routines were driven by practicality, efficiency, and the availability of easily accessible materials. The effectiveness of these medieval cleaning methods is a matter of some debate. While they may not have achieved the level of cleanliness that modern methods offer, they did serve to reduce odor and remove some dirt and grime. The emphasis on masking body odor with perfumes and other fragrant substances is a testament to the fact that people sought to present themselves in a socially acceptable manner, even if the standards of cleanliness differed significantly from our own. It's crucial to remember that the assessment of medieval hygiene must be considered within the context of its time. The lack of understanding of germ theory, coupled with limited access to clean water and effective cleaning agents, significantly shaped the approaches to cleanliness employed during the medieval period. The methods may seem crude and inadequate to us today, yet they were the best that people could do with the resources and knowledge available to them. It's a story not just of dirt and grime, but of human ingenuity, resourcefulness, and adaptation in the face of limited technology and understanding. The smell of the Middle Ages, while often unpleasant to our modern sensibilities, was a complex fragrance that told a story of daily life, social status, and the ever-present struggle for comfort and cleanliness in a world without easy access to the conveniences that we now take for granted. The next chapter will delve into the role of religion and superstition in shaping the perceptions of and attitudes toward hygiene in the medieval world. Chapter 2: The Plague and its Impact on Hygiene. The Black Death, that grim reaper of the 14th century, cast a long shadow over Europe, leaving an indelible mark on its societies and cultures. While its impact on hygiene practices might seem self-evident, wouldn't a devastating plague spur drastic improvements in cleanliness? The reality is far more nuanced and, dare I say, fascinatingly illogical. The bubonic plague, caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, ravaged populations, yet its influence on medieval hygiene was surprisingly indirect and, in some instances, even counterintuitive. The prevailing medical understanding of the time offered little in the way of accurate explanations. The miasma theory, which posited that disease arose from bad air, held sway, a concept reinforced by the stench that permeated medieval towns and cities. The horrifying reality of rotting corpses piled high in streets, alongside the ever-present aroma of unwashed bodies and overflowing cesspits, supported this theory, even if it was demonstrably wrong. Therefore, the stench was not caused by the plague, but rather viewed as one of its symptoms, indicative of the putrid air thought to cause it. This misconception led to rather peculiar preventative measures. Instead of focusing on personal cleanliness, many believed that purifying the air was the key to avoiding the plague. This led to the widespread burning of aromatic herbs and spices such as lavender, rosemary, and juniper in an attempt to counteract the foul odors believed to carry the disease. The resulting smoke, however, likely did little to prevent the spread of the plague, but it did contribute to the already smoky, haze-filled atmosphere of medieval towns and cities, a truly pungent and evocative image. Think of it as a medieval air freshener, albeit one with a far more limited effectiveness and possibly even harmful effects. Furthermore, many resorted to fragrant perfumes and oils, lavishly applied to mask the pervasive smells of decomposing bodies and unwashed skin. The upper classes indulged in expensive, imported perfumes, while the poor utilized more readily available herbs and spices. This further emphasized the class divisions. The wealthy could afford to mask the pervasive stench, creating a veneer of cleanliness, while the poor were left to endure it. This wasn't a conscious choice to avoid the plague. They were simply masking the ever-present smells associated with their poverty. This layer of pungent perfumes created a peculiar olfactory landscape, a blend of exotic aromas and the grim undercurrent of decay. Imagine walking through a medieval town, a sensory assault of rotting flesh, sewage, and a rather extravagant cloud of perfume masking it all. A truly pungent perfume of death and desperation. Interestingly, the widespread belief in the miasma theory actually hindered any real advancements in hygiene practices. If disease was caused by bad air, then washing one's body might even be harmful, opening pores and making individuals more susceptible to disease. This illogical connection meant that the plague, rather than prompting an increase in hygiene, reinforced existing practices, namely the relative infrequency of bathing and the continued reliance on methods such as vinegar, ashes, and perfumes. The public health measures of the time were, to put it mildly, inadequate. Quarantines were implemented, but their effectiveness varied significantly depending on the enforcement. While some communities implemented relatively successful quarantines, many others were hampered by a lack of resources, organization, and a general lack of understanding of how infectious diseases spread. The effectiveness of quarantine was dependent largely upon the local authorities and their ability to enforce it. One cannot overlook the religious interpretations of the plague. Many saw the Black Death as divine punishment for the sins of humanity. This theological framework influenced the reactions to the plague, with some turning to intense religious devotion, while others engaged in hedonistic excess, living life as if the end were near. Neither of these reactions led to improved hygiene. Rather, the focus shifted away from the mundane concerns of cleanliness towards a preoccupation with spiritual matters or fleeting pleasures. This shift in focus further hindered any meaningful development in hygiene practices. The lack of knowledge about the causes of the plague hindered the implementation of effective measures. Even after the plague had subsided, the underlying misconceptions persisted, perpetuating the pre-existing attitudes towards hygiene and further contributing to the continued prevalence of unsanitary conditions. The plague served as a terrifying illustration of humanity's vulnerability, but its impact on hygiene practices was far from revolutionary. While some marginal improvements in sanitation might have been implemented in certain regions, perhaps a more concerted effort to remove the rotting corpses from streets, these were largely reactive rather than proactive measures. There was no significant shift towards regular bathing, improvements in sewage systems, or any widespread adoption of improved cleaning methods. The plague was a cataclysmic event, yet its effect on hygiene practices was surprisingly limited and mainly reinforced rather than revolutionized existing methods and beliefs. One might argue that the sheer devastation of the plague overshadowed any immediate concerns about hygiene. Survival, not cleanliness, was the overriding priority. With death lurking around every corner, the daily struggle for survival likely left little time or energy for any dramatic shift in hygiene practices. Practical concerns such as obtaining food and shelter outweighed the rather abstract concept of hygiene and germ theory. It's crucial to avoid the easy narrative of the Black Death leading to hygienic reforms. The reality was far more complex and far less straightforward. The plague highlighted the fragility of medieval societies, but it did not, in itself, prompt a significant transformation in hygiene practices. The miasma theory, religious interpretations, and the daily struggle for survival all contributed to the continued prevalence of unsanitary conditions. The lack of a fundamental shift in attitudes towards cleanliness underscores the deep-seated beliefs and limited understanding of the time. The enduring legacy of the Black Death lies not in a sudden improvement of hygiene, but in the stark reminder of humanity's susceptibility to disease and the limitations of its understanding of the natural world. The stench of the Middle Ages sadly remained, a potent symbol of the enduring challenge of sanitation and public health, even in the face of a devastating pandemic. The story of the Black Death's influence on hygiene is a story of missed opportunities, of deeply entrenched beliefs that were impervious to the grim lessons learned from the plague. The absence of progress in sanitation is a testament to the limitations of medical knowledge and the deep-seated cultural and religious convictions of the time. The plague served as a dramatic backdrop, illuminating the stark realities of medieval life, but failed to initiate any significant, lasting revolution in the pursuit of cleanliness. The following chapter will explore the role of religion and superstition in shaping the perceptions and attitudes toward hygiene in the medieval world, demonstrating how these forces often overshadowed the practical realities of cleanliness and disease prevention. The devastating sweep of the Black Death across Europe not only resulted in unimaginable death tolls, but also profoundly impacted the social fabric of medieval society. One of the most significant responses to the plague, born out of both fear and a rudimentary understanding of contagion, was the implementation of quarantine and isolation measures. These measures, however, varied wildly in their effectiveness, shaped by a combination of logistical challenges, religious beliefs, and the sheer terror the plague inspired. Their impact rippled far beyond the immediate health concerns, leaving deep scars on the economic and social landscape of the time. The concept of quarantine, in its most basic form, was not entirely new to the medieval world. Leprosariums, established centuries earlier to isolate individuals with leprosy, served as a precedent. However, the scale of the Black Death demanded a much broader and more hastily implemented approach. The implementation of quarantine often fell to local authorities, town councils, monasteries, and even individual landowners, leading to a patchwork of measures with varying degrees of success. Some communities showed remarkable foresight and organization, establishing designated quarantine zones outside of town walls, sometimes even on islands or remote locations. These zones were not always comfortable, often lacking sufficient provisions, leading to further suffering for those forced into isolation. Historical records vividly depict the challenges of enforcing quarantines. Accounts from Italy and France reveal attempts to restrict movement, with checkpoints set up on roads and borders to prevent the spread of infection. These measures, however, proved difficult to maintain, particularly in rural areas where population density was lower, enforcement was weaker, and the mobility of the populace was higher. Those who tried to circumvent the quarantines risked severe penalties, ranging from fines to imprisonment and even execution. But desperation often overwhelmed caution, and many fled from quarantined areas, inadvertently spreading the disease further. The effectiveness of quarantines was further compromised by the lack of understanding about the mode of transmission of the plague. The prevailing miasma theory, attributing disease to bad air, led to a focus on purifying the air rather than isolating infected individuals. This focus on the air, neglecting the reality of flea-borne transmission, often rendered quarantine efforts largely futile. For example, while a community might isolate a family with plague victims, the rats and fleas that carried the disease were free to move unchecked, nullifying the impact of quarantine. This fundamental misunderstanding was one of the significant reasons for the plague's devastating impact. Beyond the logistical difficulties, the social and economic consequences of quarantine were far-reaching. Trade routes were disrupted as towns and regions closed their borders, leading to shortages of essential goods and soaring prices. Agricultural production suffered as farmers and laborers were forced into isolation, preventing harvests and livestock management. The economic devastation caused by the plague was further exacerbated by the disruptions caused by quarantine measures. The reliance on seasonal agricultural labor resulted in the severe disruption of agricultural cycles, contributing to widespread famine in many affected regions. The disruption of the wool trade in England, for example, had significant economic and social ramifications, affecting wool merchants, weavers, and the broader economy. The impact on social structures was equally profound. Quarantine created a sense of fear and mistrust within communities. Families were separated, and the social support networks that had previously been crucial for survival were weakened. The isolation intensified the already pervasive sense of despair and uncertainty surrounding the plague, leading to social unrest and a breakdown of the established social order. The uncertainty and fear regarding the future led many to withdraw from social engagements and public events, accelerating the social disarray. Furthermore, the religious interpretations of the plague heavily influenced the attitudes toward quarantine. The plague was seen by many as divine punishment, and this belief impacted the way quarantine was perceived and implemented. Some communities viewed quarantine as a necessary act of piety, a way to prevent the spread of God's wrath, while others saw it as an infringement on their religious freedom or a sign of the approaching apocalypse. These varying religious interpretations contributed to inconsistent implementation and inconsistent levels of cooperation from the community. The religious framework of that era had a huge impact on the compliance and acceptance of such social restrictions. The social impact of isolation extended beyond the practical aspects of quarantine. The loss of loved ones, coupled with the emotional isolation experienced by those quarantined, left profound psychological scars on individuals and communities. The grief and trauma were further compounded by the uncertainty and fear surrounding the plague, leading to a long-lasting emotional impact. The stories of families separated, the fear of the disease, and the uncertainties surrounding the future led to many long-term psychological and social effects. In summary, while quarantine and isolation were among the main responses to the Black Death and other medieval plagues, their effectiveness was severely limited by a multitude of factors. The limited understanding of disease transmission, logistical challenges, economic repercussions, and the religious interpretations of the pandemic all contributed to their inconsistent implementation and ultimately limited success in curbing the spread of the plague. The devastating social and economic ramifications of these measures highlight the complex interplay between health, economics, and religious beliefs during the medieval period, illustrating how a single crisis could shake the very foundations of medieval society. The legacy of quarantine in the Middle Ages is not simply a story of prevention and cure, but rather a testament to the challenges faced in the face of widespread disease and the resilience of communities struggling for survival. The absence of effective public health measures, coupled with the lack of understanding of the disease's transmission, ultimately underscores the fragility of medieval society and its responses to devastating pandemics. This chapter provides context for the subsequent chapter, which analyzes the cultural and intellectual response to the plague, exploring the development of new social practices and evolving belief systems. The pervasive stench of death and decay that clung to medieval cities wasn't merely a consequence of poor sanitation. It was deeply entwined with the prevailing medical theories of the time. Understanding the medieval mindset regarding disease is crucial to appreciating, or perhaps even finding a morbidly humorous element in, their approach to hygiene. The dominant medical theory wasn't based on germ theory, a concept centuries in the future. Instead, the humoral theory, inherited from classical Greek medicine, held sway. This theory posited that the human body contained 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health was believed to be a delicate balance of these humors. Illness resulted from an imbalance. This imbalance, according to medieval physicians, could be caused by various factors, many of which contributed to the era's unique take on hygiene, or lack thereof. One popular belief was the miasma theory, which linked disease to bad air, foul-smelling vapors emanating from decaying matter, swamps, or even the breath of the sick. This theory, far from promoting cleanliness, actually discouraged certain hygiene practices. Washing too frequently was seen as potentially upsetting the delicate balance of humors, weakening the body, and making it more susceptible to disease. The logic, however flawed by modern standards, was compelling to medieval thinkers. Water, especially cold water, was thought to chill the body, leading to an imbalance of humors and weakening the body's defenses. This belief directly impacted bathing practices. While the common misconception of medieval Europeans rarely bathing is largely exaggerated, it's true that frequent bathing was not the norm, especially amongst the common folk. The year once bath, though undoubtedly a gross oversimplification of bathing habits across the medieval period, reflects the prevailing medical views. A single annual bath was thought sufficient to cleanse the body of impurities and restore the humoral balance. More frequent bathing was seen as unnecessary and potentially harmful. Consequently, rather than relying on water for cleanliness, medieval people employed various methods to mask body odor and ward off disease. Perfumes, strong smelling herbs, and fragrant oils were liberally used, not just by the wealthy, but also by those of lower social standing who could manage even the most basic access to these aromatics. These scents aimed to overcome the pervasive, unpleasant smells of the era, not necessarily to mask the odors of unwashed bodies, but to overpower the noxious miasmas believed to cause illness. Vinegar, readily available and relatively inexpensive, served a dual purpose. It helped to mask odors and was believed to have purifying qualities, further reinforcing the miasma theory. Medieval medical texts, often based on ancient Greek and Roman sources, provided a framework for understanding and treating disease. These texts, while frequently inaccurate by modern standards, were the authoritative sources of medical knowledge. One of the most widely used medical texts was the Canon of Medicine by Avicenna ibn Sina, a Persian polymath whose work was influential throughout the medieval world. Avicenna's canon, while advancing certain aspects of medical knowledge, still firmly adhered to the humoral theory and emphasized the importance of maintaining the balance of the body's humors. The canon and other similar texts outlined a range of treatments for various ailments, many of which involved procedures aimed at restoring the humoral balance. Bloodletting, the practice of draining blood from the body, was a common treatment for a wide array of illnesses. This practice was based on the belief that removing excess blood could restore the balance of humors and alleviate symptoms. Purging, which involved inducing vomiting or diarrhea, was another common method to eliminate supposed impurities from the body. These practices, while seemingly brutal by modern medical standards, were considered essential parts of the healing process and reflected the medieval understanding of the body and its mechanisms. The treatments prescribed in these texts were as diverse as the ailments they were intended to cure. Herbal remedies, derived from various plants, were widely used. These remedies often contained substances intended to purify or detoxify the body, further highlighting the focus on eliminating supposed impurities. Many of these remedies were passed down through generations, forming an oral tradition alongside written medical knowledge. The use of herbal remedies was complemented by a range of other practices, including prayers, charms, and amulets, showcasing the integration of religious and medical beliefs. The lack of understanding of germ theory and the dominance of the humoral theory and miasma theory had profound implications for hygiene practices. The seemingly paradoxical lack of emphasis on cleanliness, coupled with an almost obsessive focus on masking odors and purifying the air, ultimately contributed to the spread of disease. Ironically, the efforts to mitigate the perceived effects of bad air frequently undermined attempts at true hygiene, making a significant contribution to the overall unsanitary conditions common during this period. Consider the implications for waste disposal. Without a clear understanding of the role of pathogens, disposal methods were rudimentary at best. Waste was often simply thrown into the streets or into nearby bodies of water, providing breeding grounds for disease-carrying vectors. This lack of systematic waste management exacerbated the already existing problem of poor sanitation, contributing to the spread of infectious diseases. Furthermore, the prevailing medical theories and practices didn't just affect the everyday hygiene of the general population, they significantly impacted the response to outbreaks of disease, like the plague. The failure to understand the mode of transmission of diseases, such as the Black Death, hampered efforts to contain and mitigate their spread. The focus on miasma led to measures that were often ineffective or even counterproductive, such as burning incense or creating smoke screens to purify the air. This contributed to the catastrophic loss of life during pandemics. The influence of religious beliefs further complicated the situation. Plagues were often seen as divine punishment, leading to a focus on spiritual remedies, alongside, or even instead of, practical measures. This faith-based response, while offering solace and a sense of order amidst chaos, hindered the development of more effective disease prevention and control strategies. In conclusion, the medical theories and practices of the medieval period were far removed from modern understanding. The humoral theory, the miasma theory, and the related treatments and hygiene practices profoundly shaped the medieval experience, not only influencing individual health and well-being, but also having vast societal ramifications, especially in the response to devastating pandemics. Their actions, viewed through a modern lens, may appear absurd or even grotesque, yet they highlight the complexities of medical understanding in a time profoundly lacking in the scientific tools and knowledge we take for granted today. The medieval approach to hygiene, born from a mix of flawed theories, religious beliefs, and practical limitations, provides a fascinating case study in the evolution of human understanding of disease and its prevention, a journey that continues to this day. It also reminds us that even with limited technology, human beings have always sought solutions, though those solutions may sometimes be as bizarre as they are ineffective. The pervasive stench that clung to medieval life, a miasma of bodily odors and decaying matter, wasn't merely a product of poor sanitation. It was intricately woven into the fabric of religious belief and practice. While the humoral theory and the miasma theory provided a pseudo-scientific framework for understanding disease, religion offered a spiritual lens through which to interpret suffering and mortality. This spiritual framework, far from being separate from hygiene, profoundly shaped attitudes toward the body, cleanliness, and the very nature of illness. The Christian faith, the dominant religion of medieval Europe, held a complex relationship with the physical body. While the body was seen as a vessel for the soul, it was also subject to the frailties of human nature and the temptations of the flesh. Asceticism, the practice of self-denial and rigorous discipline, found expression in various forms, some of which indirectly impacted hygiene. Fasting, for example, a common religious practice, altered dietary intake and potentially reduced the frequency of bodily functions, perhaps lessening the perceived need for frequent cleansing. However, the relationship between religion and cleanliness wasn't solely defined by asceticism. Ritual purity played a significant role in many religious practices. Baptism, a cornerstone of Christian initiation, involved the ritual cleansing of the body through immersion in water. This act symbolically washed away original sin and marked a new beginning, highlighting the association of water with spiritual purification. While the frequency of bathing amongst the general populace may have been limited, the ritual significance of water in baptism underscored its importance in spiritual cleansing, even if not in daily hygiene. Beyond baptism, numerous other religious rituals involved elements of purification. Before entering churches or participating in certain religious ceremonies, individuals might have performed acts of cleansing, such as washing their hands or faces. These practices, while not always systematic or consistent, highlighted the connection between physical cleanliness and spiritual purity. This connection was reinforced by the importance placed on the cleanliness of sacred spaces. Churches and monasteries were often meticulously maintained, reflecting the belief that a clean and orderly environment was conducive to worship and spiritual contemplation. Furthermore, the church, as a powerful institution, exerted considerable influence on public health initiatives, albeit in the ways that often fell short of modern standards. Monasteries, often centers of learning and charitable works, frequently provided healthcare services to the poor and sick. Monastic orders played a role in caring for the sick and dying, providing rudimentary medical care and managing hospitals, although their medical practices were largely shaped by the humoral theory and lacked an understanding of germ theory. However, the Church's influence on public health was not always beneficial. The tendency to view disease as divine punishment while offering spiritual solace to the afflicted often hampered the adoption of effective preventative measures. The focus on prayer, penance, and spiritual remedies, often at the expense of practical hygiene initiatives, resulted in a response to outbreaks of disease that was often inadequate and sometimes even counterproductive. Consider the reactions to the Black Death. While some religious orders engaged in charitable work, others focused primarily on spiritual responses, leading to a lack of public health measures that could have saved countless lives. The influence of religious practices extended beyond the Church's institutional role. Popular piety and folk beliefs often included practices that had an impact on hygiene, albeit often indirectly. Many religious traditions involved the use of herbs and other natural substances, often imbued with religious significance. These practices sometimes had a tangential impact on hygiene, through the use of herbs to mask unpleasant odors or treat minor ailments. However, the primary purpose was typically spiritual rather than purely hygienic. Moreover, the prevalent religious worldview strongly shaped the societal response to death and decay. Death, often seen as a transition to the afterlife, was imbued with spiritual meaning. However, the lack of proper waste management and disregard for proper disposal of corpses frequently exacerbated the spread of disease, underlining the tragic disconnect between religious interpretations and material realities. The handling of the deceased, though often ritualized, frequently contributed to the very miasma that the religious practices sought to counteract. The intertwining of religious beliefs and hygiene practices in the medieval period presents a complex and often paradoxical picture. While religious rituals emphasized ritual purification and the importance of cleanliness in sacred spaces, the spiritual interpretation of disease often hindered the development of effective public health measures. The emphasis on spiritual remedies, combined with a lack of understanding of germ theory, resulted in a response to epidemics that was tragically ineffective. However, it is important to note that religious institutions did provide some charitable health care, even within the limitations of their knowledge base. Ultimately, the religious beliefs of the medieval period were integral to their understanding and management, or mismanagement, of hygiene. The relationship was multifaceted, encompassing elements of both promotion and hindrance. Religious rituals often highlighted the importance of symbolic purity, yet simultaneously, religious interpretation of disease diverted attention from practical preventative measures. Studying this complex interplay sheds light not only on the hygiene practices of the era, but also on the intricate relationship between belief systems, societal structures, and public health outcomes, a relationship that continues to shape our world today. The seemingly simple act of washing one's hands, for instance, takes on a much deeper meaning when we consider its historical context. Acknowledging the blend of the practical and the spiritual, the scientific and the sacred that defined medieval life. Understanding this historical context allows us to appreciate the evolution of our own understandings of hygiene and health, recognizing the long and winding road from the pungent realities of medieval life to the comparatively sanitized world we inhabit today. Even the most modern medical practices remain to some extent entwined with the legacy of ancient spiritual beliefs and practices, a testament to the enduring power of human faith and its subtle but significant influence on the health and well-being of civilizations across the ages. The pervasive stench of medieval life, a tapestry woven from bodily odors and decaying refuse, fueled a rich tapestry of folk remedies and superstitions aimed at warding off disease. These practices, a fascinating blend of practical observation and magical thinking, offer the window into the medieval mindset, revealing a world where the line between science and superstition was often blurred. The humoral theory, the dominant medical model of the time, posited that the body contained four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and that an imbalance in these humors caused illness. This theory, combined with the miasma theory, the belief that disease was caused by bad air, shaped many folk remedies, which often focused on restoring balance or purifying the air. One of the most widely used methods for maintaining a semblance of cleanliness was the liberal applications of perfumes and fragrant herbs. These weren't merely for aesthetic purposes, they served a practical, albeit misguided function in attempting to mask the unpleasant odors associated with poor sanitation and personal hygiene. Vinegar, with its pungent aroma, was a common choice, believed to purify the air and combat the miasma. Rosewater, lavender, and various other aromatic plants were also employed. Their fragrant essences intended to create a more pleasant environment, and it was hoped to deter disease. The application of these scents was often seen as a prophylactic measure, or preventative against disease, based on the belief that a fragrant environment was a healthy environment. This was not based on scientific understanding, but rather on an intuitive understanding that pleasant smells correlated with health, just as unpleasant smells were associated with sickness and death. Beyond perfumes, a range of herbal remedies were widely employed. Many herbs were believed to possess medicinal properties, some with a basis in real effects, while others were products of folk belief. Wormwood, for instance, was used to treat fevers and digestive problems. Chamomile was believed to soothe nerves and alleviate anxiety, while rosemary was associated with improving memory and boosting circulation. The application of these herbs, often in the form of poultices, infusions, or salves, wasn't just a medical practice. It was also deeply embedded in the spiritual and cultural life of the medieval community. Herbalists, often women, held a position of significant influence within their communities, providing not only physical remedies, but also spiritual comfort and guidance. The use of bloodletting was another common practice, grounded in the humoral theory. The belief was that an excess of blood could lead to disease, and removing some blood would restore balance to the humors. This practice, often performed with leeches or by lancing veins, was seen as a necessary measure to treat various ailments, from headaches and fevers to more serious conditions. While bloodletting was undeniably dangerous, it was a testament to the limitations of medical knowledge at the time and the desperate search for effective remedies, even if those remedies were ultimately more harmful than helpful. The prevalence of bloodletting highlights the chasm between the folk beliefs and the burgeoning medical knowledge of the time, a chasm that would not be bridged for centuries. Alongside herbal remedies and bloodletting, many superstitions were intertwined with hygiene practices. Certain charms and amulets were believed to offer protection against disease. These items might be worn as jewelry or hung in homes, providing a sense of security and hope in a world rife with illness and uncertainty. The effectiveness of these amulets, of course, lay not in their inherent properties, but in the psychological reassurance they provided. These were not mere trinkets, but potent symbols of faith and hope in the face of a terrifying reality. The act of bathing, though surprisingly complex, reveals much about medieval society. The very notion of regular bathing was not universally embraced, as the humoral theory suggested that frequent bathing could disrupt the delicate balance of humors. However, the lack of regular bathing was not an indicator of ignorance, but rather of a worldview deeply entrenched in the established medical and religious tenets of the era. A yearly cleansing, often performed in the summer months, was common practice, but in between, bodily odors were often masked through the use of perfumes and other fragrant substances, not just because of aversion to body odor, but also to prevent the supposedly harmful imbalance of humors that frequent bathing could bring. Furthermore, the use of ashes and powders for cleansing purposes is noteworthy. These substances, sometimes mixed with fragrant herbs or oils, provided a makeshift alternative to soap and water. This was not a result of laziness or inaccessibility, but instead a strategic approach to personal hygiene dictated by the humoral theory and the prevailing understanding of disease. They believed that the ashes provided an absorbent quality, helping to cleanse and dry the skin. Indeed, certain volcanic ash had natural antimicrobial properties, providing a level of hygiene not explicitly understood at the time. The application of these substances underscores the creativity and resourcefulness of medieval people in their quest for cleanliness within the constraints of their limited understanding. Interestingly, the religious beliefs of the era profoundly influenced hygiene practices. Ritualistic purity, an important component of Christian practice, highlighted the symbolic significance of cleansing. However, this symbolic cleansing did not always translate into regular physical cleanliness. The emphasis on spiritual purity, while seemingly incongruous with the pervasive stench of daily life, suggests a separation between the physical and spiritual realms, a distinction that shaped attitudes toward hygiene and cleanliness. The ritualistic purification of churches and monasteries also demonstrates the belief in a connection between the physical environment and spiritual purity. The cleanliness of these sacred spaces reinforces the symbolic significance of cleanliness in the religious sphere, while simultaneously contrasting with the common practice of infrequent bathing and limited personal hygiene among the general populace. The Black Death, a pivotal moment in European history, further highlighted the interplay between folk remedies, superstition, and public health. While some individuals sought refuge in religious practices and amulets, others turned to increasingly desperate measures, including flagellants who whipped themselves to atone for perceived sins that had led to the plague. The use of fragrant herbs, amulets, and ritualistic purification became more intense, revealing the psychological impact of the devastating pandemic on the medieval psyche. The desperate search for remedies and protections underscores the power of belief in the face of such widespread death and destruction, and the critical role that superstition and folk remedies played in dealing with such an overwhelming calamity. The pandemic showcased the limitations of both scientific understanding and medical practices of the time, leaving a population desperate for answers and clinging to beliefs and traditions that sometimes offered psychological comfort, even if not actual protection. In conclusion, the folk remedies and superstitions surrounding hygiene in the medieval period paint a vivid picture of a time when science and belief were inextricably linked. The humoral theory, miasma theory, and the prevailing religious beliefs profoundly shaped attitudes towards cleanliness and disease prevention. While many of these practices were ineffective or even harmful by modern standards, they reflect the ingenuity and resourcefulness of medieval people in their attempts to combat disease and maintain a semblance of health and well-being. Their efforts offer a compelling narrative of resilience and adaptation in the face of limited understanding, highlighting the enduring human quest to comprehend and control the forces that shape their lives. It is this nuanced understanding of their beliefs, even those demonstrably false by modern standards, that reveals the essential humanity of the medieval person. Their struggle to understand disease and their attempts to cope with the conditions of their time. The legacy of these folk remedies and superstitions extends far beyond the medieval period, reminding us of the complex interplay between science, culture, and belief in shaping our understanding of health and hygiene. Chapter 3: Clothing and Personal Cleanliness. The sheer variety of textiles used in medieval Europe and the subsequent challenges in their cleaning offers a fascinating glimpse into daily life. Forget the streamlined efficiency of modern laundry. Washing clothes in the Middle Ages was a laborious, often communal affair, dictated as much by the availability of resources as by the fabric itself. The most common materials were linen and wool, their properties dictating different cleaning approaches. Linen, prized for its absorbency and relative ease of care, was the fabric of choice for undergarments and finer garments of the wealthy. Wool, warmer and more durable, formed the backbone of everyday clothing for most, particularly in the colder climates of northern Europe. However, wool's unique properties, its tendency to felt and shrink, made it significantly more challenging to clean. Imagine the process. Firstly, the sorting. Linen and wool were rarely washed together. Linen, being more delicate, required gentler treatment, avoiding the harsh scrubbing that might be employed for more resilient wool garments. Color also played a role. The vibrant hues of dyed fabrics, often achieved using natural dyes derived from plants and insects, required careful handling to prevent color bleeding. A bright scarlet tunic, for instance, wouldn't be tossed in with a dull brown woolen shirt. The process of separating and sorting the laundry alone was a significant undertaking, often a shared activity among family members or even neighbors. The laundering itself was a multifaceted affair. Water, naturally, was the primary cleaning agent, but its accessibility varied widely. Those living near rivers or streams had a distinct advantage. The flowing water assisted in rinsing and removing soil. Those further afield relied on wells or rainwater collection, both of which could be less abundant and more prone to contamination. This limitation directly impacted the frequency of washing. While linen garments might be washed more regularly, particularly undergarments, woolen clothes were often cleaned far less frequently, sometimes only once or twice a year. This is where the previously mentioned use of herbs and perfumes becomes particularly relevant. Masking the smell of infrequently washed clothes was a necessity, not a mere luxury. The methods employed were surprisingly diverse and resourceful. The absence of modern detergents meant that other cleaning agents were used. Soap, while available, was a luxury item, largely unaffordable for the majority of the population. In its place, a variety of substances were employed, including urine, ashes, and various plants known for their cleansing properties. Urine, rich in ammonia, acted as a natural cleaning agent. It would have been collected in designated containers and allowed to age, strengthening its cleansing properties. This isn't as unpleasant as it initially sounds. Aged urine was essentially a type of natural bleach and disinfectant. Ashes, often from wood fires, were used as an abrasive to help remove dirt and grime. This was particularly useful for wool, the coarser texture of which could withstand more vigorous scrubbing. These ashes might be mixed with water to form a sort of paste that would be worked into the fabric. Certain plants, like soapwort, possessed natural saponins that had a cleansing effect similar to modern soaps and were often used in combination with the ashes and water. The overall effect was less about producing the fluffy, fresh scent of modern detergents and more about a thorough mechanical cleaning. The goal was to remove the dirt, not necessarily to leave the garments smelling sweetly fragrant, a role that again was filled by the perfumes and fragrant herbs mentioned before. The washing itself was a physically demanding task. Clothing would be beaten against rocks or a washboard, or pounded with wooden mallets to dislodge dirt. Larger items, like blankets, might be scrubbed on a flat surface with a brush. The whole process would have involved significant physical exertion. After scrubbing, the textiles would be rinsed repeatedly in the flowing water of a stream or river. The clear, moving water assisting in the removal of soap, urine, ash, or any mixture thereof. Drying the laundry was equally as challenging. Garments would be hung on lines, spread out on bushes, or stretched on fences to allow for air drying. This drying process was entirely reliant on the weather and could be significantly impacted by unexpected rain showers. Wool, taking considerably longer to dry than linen, required careful attention to prevent mildew or mustiness. For the winter months, drying laundry indoors presented a challenge. Overcrowding and limited ventilation could pose a problem. The lack of modern ironing techniques meant that wrinkles were an inevitability. The creases and folds in medieval clothing, therefore, tell a tale of a life less obsessed with pristine smoothness and more focused on practicality and resilience. The appearance of clothes wasn't just about aesthetics, it was a practical reflection of the wearer's daily activities, their environment, and the challenges involved in maintaining their garments. The frequency of washing varied significantly depending on a number of factors. Undergarments, like shirts and chemises, particularly for those who could afford more frequent changes of linen clothing, were washed far more frequently than outer garments, perhaps weekly or even more often for the wealthier. Outer garments, however, were washed far less often. The frequency varied widely according to the material and the social standing of the wearer. Wool garments, especially those worn for work or in harsh conditions, might only be cleaned once or twice a year. A wealthy individual might have several sets of clothing, allowing for rotation and more frequent changes of garments to maintain a cleaner appearance, while a peasant might only have one or two sets, necessitating less frequent washing. Beyond the physical act of laundering, the disposal of wastewater poses another intriguing historical challenge. The lack of modern sewage systems meant that wastewater was often disposed of directly into rivers or streams, raising concerns about water pollution and the spread of disease. This highlights the complex interplay between personal hygiene and public health in the medieval era. The methods and frequency of washing in the medieval period were not simply dictated by a lack of resources or technology. They were shaped by a complex interplay of cultural beliefs, societal structures, and environmental factors. The very act of washing was a complex social, environmental, and economic event. It involved the availability of resources, the social status of the wearer, the type of fabric, and even the prevailing weather conditions. The challenges of medieval laundry offer a revealing insight into the ingenuity, resilience, and resourcefulness of people in a time before modern washing machines and detergents. The smell of medieval Europe, a blend of herbs, sweat, and occasionally the tang of aged urine, was a far cry from our modern standards of cleanliness. Yet it was a smell born from necessity, practicality, and a resourcefulness forged in the crucible of daily life. It speaks volumes of a time that was profoundly different from our own, a time where the effort, the creativity, and the sheer physical work involved in maintaining even basic cleanliness was a far greater challenge than we can easily imagine today. The story of medieval hygiene isn't solely one of infrequent bathing and pungent aromas. It's also a tale woven into the very fabric, literally, of the clothing worn. Undergarments, those often overlooked layers beneath the visible robes and tunics, played a surprisingly crucial role in the medieval struggle for cleanliness, or at least the appearance of cleanliness. For the wealthy, linen was king. This was no mere coincidence. Linen, derived from flax, was prized for its absorbency, its relative ease of laundering compared to wool, and, importantly, its breathability. Imagine the sweltering heat of a summer day in a thick woolen tunic. A linen chemise, however, offered a cooler, more comfortable underlayer, helping to wick away sweat and reduce the buildup of unpleasant odors. These chemises, often ankle length and relatively loose fitting, were the foundation of a wealthy individual's wardrobe. They were a crucial element in maintaining a semblance of freshness, even if a full body wash was a far less frequent event. The frequency of changing these undergarments, however, wasn't dictated by some rigid timetable adhered to by all. It varied enormously based on wealth and access to resources. A wealthy noblewoman might have had a substantial collection of chemises, allowing her to change them daily or even more frequently. This regular changing, combined with the linen's ease of laundering, contributed to a cleaner feeling, even if the idea of clean differed drastically from modern standards. The linen chemises could be washed more frequently, and the availability of multiple undergarments meant that the wearers could always have a fresh and relatively clean linen garment next to their skin. For the less fortunate, however, the picture changed drastically. Peasants and the working poor had significantly less access to linen. Wool, while warmer and more durable, was less absorbent and far more difficult to clean. A woolen undershirt, if they possessed one at all, would have been far less effective in wicking away sweat and would have been far less frequently washed. This, coupled with the arduous task of laundering wool, meant that these garments might have been worn for days, weeks, or even months before being washed, if at all. Their woolen undergarments, if worn at all, were likely to be thicker, coarser, and far less frequently laundered. A single woolen undershirt might have been worn continuously for weeks, offering little respite from the inevitable buildup of grime, sweat, and body odor. The materials used for undergarments also extended beyond linen and wool. Hemp, a coarser fiber, was sometimes used for undergarments, particularly for those who couldn't afford linen. Hemp was durable and relatively inexpensive, but it lacked the softness and absorbency of linen. It would have been similarly difficult to launder. As with wool, the undergarments made from hemp would likely be worn for weeks at a time, if not months. The choice between linen and hemp, therefore, wasn't just a matter of personal preference, but a clear indicator of social and economic status. The cut and style of undergarments also reflected social standing. Wealthier individuals could afford more elaborate garments. Their chemises might be adorned with delicate embroidery or lace, features completely absent from the simple, functional undergarments of the poor. The presence of additional layers of underclothing, the fine linen of the shirts, the use of additional layers, or the choice of finer fabrics were all important factors that mark the difference in the level of cleanliness, or at least the appearance of cleanliness. The impact of undergarments on disease prevention is a fascinating and complex area. While we might not think of undergarments as playing a significant role in disease transmission today, in the medieval period, their role was subtle yet important. Regular changes of linen undergarments for the wealthier classes undoubtedly helped to prevent the spread of certain skin infections and parasites. The absorbency of the linen would have helped to keep sweat away from the skin, reducing the risk of infections and the buildup of potentially harmful bacteria. This should not be misinterpreted, however. Linen was not a magical preventative measure. The abundance of linen would have certainly improved cleanliness in this period, helping those that could afford it to be cleaner, but it did not prevent the spread of the plague or other diseases. Conversely, the infrequent changing of woolen undergarments amongst the poor would have created an ideal breeding ground for parasites and bacteria. Lice infestations were common, even among the wealthy, but were far more prevalent amongst those who could not afford regular changes of clothing. Scabies, a skin condition caused by mites, also thrived in conditions of poor hygiene and was a common affliction, particularly amongst the impoverished. The lack of access to sufficient undergarments, coupled with the difficulty of laundering wool, meant that these conditions were commonplace, adding another layer to the already complex picture of medieval hygiene and health. The relationship between undergarments and overall health was further complicated by broader societal factors. Overcrowding, poor sanitation, and malnutrition all contributed to the spread of disease. While clean undergarments played a small role in mitigating some health risks, they were by no means a panacea. The health of the population was not solely a matter of the cleanliness of the undergarments. It was dictated by multiple other factors, including sanitation and availability of food. The study of medieval undergarments, therefore, offers a window into not only the daily lives of people in the Middle Ages, but also the complex interplay between personal hygiene, social class, and public health. The humble chemise, far from being a mere undergarment, becomes a symbol of the stark disparities in medieval society, highlighting the unequal access to resources and its profound impact on health and well-being. It reminds us that even the most intimate aspects of daily life were shaped by the prevailing social and economic structures of the time. The simple act of changing undergarments becomes a powerful lens through which we can understand the realities of medieval life, revealing a society grappling with the challenges of cleanliness and health in a way vastly different from our own. The smell, the feel, and even the very fabric of medieval undergarments tells a story far more nuanced and intricate than we might initially imagine. The story of medieval cleanliness extends beyond undergarments to encompass another crucial aspect of personal presentation: hair and headwear. While the frequency of bathing might have been infrequent, the attention paid to hair, or rather its management and concealment, reveals a surprisingly sophisticated approach to hygiene, or at least the impression of hygiene. Hair in the medieval world was far from being a purely aesthetic concern. It held social, religious, and even hygienic significance. For the upper classes, elaborate hairstyles were a status symbol. Think of the depictions in illuminated manuscripts and tapestries. Women with intricately braided hair adorned with jewels and ribbons, men with carefully sculpted curls and beards. These styles weren't simply achieved with a quick brush and comb. They required hours of meticulous work by skilled hairdressers, often employing a variety of tools and products. Oils, possibly infused with herbs, were used to condition and style the hair, lending it a glossy sheen. These oils, however, presented a double-edged sword. While they helped to improve the appearance of the hair, they also attracted dirt and dust, making regular cleansing of the hair paramount. Even in this era of limited bathing, the maintenance of these elaborate hairstyles required significant resources. The wealthy could afford to regularly wash and condition their hair using the best available oils and combs. They often employed personal servants specifically to attend to their hairdressing needs, ensuring that their locks remained meticulously styled and relatively clean. The sheer volume of hair, often elaborately styled and decorated, required constant maintenance and periodic cleaning. Washing the hair was important, but it was just one element in a broader practice of maintaining a respectable outward appearance. For the lower classes, however, the reality was far more austere. Long hair, particularly for women, was often a practical impediment to daily tasks. Instead of elaborate styles, simpler braids or buns were the norm. Access to oils and combs was limited, and the time required for elaborate hairdressing was often a luxury they couldn't afford. Washing their hair may have been done less frequently, if ever, using perhaps the leftover water from the washing of clothes or household items. The lack of time and materials meant that maintaining a complex hairstyle would be a constant and arduous task. The role of head coverings further complicates the picture. For both men and women, head coverings served multiple purposes, going far beyond mere fashion statements. They provided protection from the elements, sun, rain, and cold, and offered a degree of modesty, particularly for women. Head coverings were also an essential component of social signaling, showcasing wealth, social status, and religious affiliation. The type of head covering, whether a simple linen cloth or an elaborate jeweled headdress, reflected an individual's position in society. In addition to their practical and social functions, head coverings played a role in hygiene. They could act as a barrier against dust, dirt, and insects, particularly lice, which were widespread. A simple linen cloth could help keep the hair relatively clean and even potentially assist in the prevention of head lice infestations. Heavier, more elaborate head coverings would offer even greater protection. The extent to which this protection was effective, of course, depended on the material of the head covering, the frequency of its changing, and the overall level of cleanliness of the individual. Religious practices also influenced hairstyles and headwear. The religious orders often had specific rules governing hair length and style, often dictating simple, unadorned styles or complete head shaving, reflecting their renunciation of worldly vanities. These religious directives served not only spiritual purposes, but also impacted the hygiene practices of the communities. The religious rules regarding hair may have contributed to the relative cleanliness and lack of infestation of members of the religious orders. While some might view head coverings as an impediment to personal hygiene, the opposite may have been true. They offered a crucial layer of protection, preventing hair from becoming excessively dirty and attracting insects. This was particularly important in a time when regular hair washing was not always feasible for everyone. Head coverings therefore acted as an important additional layer, ensuring that the appearance of cleanliness was not necessarily sacrificed. The frequency with which head coverings were changed varied widely according to social class and access to resources. Wealthier individuals might have had multiple headdresses in their wardrobes, allowing for regular changes. Those with lesser resources would have relied on fewer and less frequently washed head coverings. The depiction of hairstyles and head coverings in medieval art offers invaluable insight into the practices of the time. Illuminated manuscripts, tapestries, and sculptures reveal a spectrum of styles, ranging from simple braids to highly elaborate headdresses, each reflecting the social status of the individual depicted. Careful examination of these artistic representations allows historians to reconstruct the hairstyles, the manner in which they were maintained, and the various tools used in achieving these styles. Medieval literature also provides glimpses into the practices surrounding hair and headwear. While such literature often focuses on the wealthy and aristocratic classes, it can still shed some light on the styles and practices that were available, even if it presents an incomplete picture. Literary descriptions of elaborate hairstyles and descriptions of hair care products, while perhaps idealized, can also serve as clues. However, our understanding remains partial. While visual and written sources provide valuable insights, they don't give us the complete picture. For example, we don't have a wealth of information on the hair care routines of the working classes, their access to tools and products, and the frequency with which they washed or styled their hair. The study of medieval hair and headwear reveals more than just aesthetic choices. It offers a window into the complexities of medieval life, the stark social inequalities of the era, and the innovative ways in which people of the Middle Ages attempted to cope with the challenges of hygiene, health, and personal presentation. It was a society where the appearance of cleanliness often trumped the reality, and where the simple act of covering one's hair became a complex dance of social signaling, religious observance, and, perhaps surprisingly, a form of rudimentary hygiene protection. The humble head covering, therefore, becomes not simply a functional item, but a fascinating symbol of the medieval world's ongoing struggle with the very concept of cleanliness. The story of medieval hair and headwear is a testament to the creativity and resourcefulness of medieval people, even in the face of limited resources and a different understanding of hygiene than our own. The transition from the meticulous grooming of hair and headwear to the subject of oral hygiene in the medieval world might seem abrupt, but in reality, it's a natural progression. Both reflect the era's complex relationship with cleanliness, a struggle often marked by ingenious workarounds and a pronounced disparity between the ideal and the reality. While the wealthy could afford elaborate hair care routines, their oral health, we'll see, remained a surprisingly similar challenge to those less fortunate. Let's be upfront. The image of a medieval knight flashing a pearly white smile is largely a product of modern cinematic fantasy. The reality, sadly, involved a far less glamorous dental landscape. The medieval understanding of oral hygiene was, to put it mildly, rudimentary. The concept of daily brushing, as we understand it, was completely absent. Toothbrushes, as we know them, simply didn't exist. There's no evidence of mass-produced or even widespread artisan-crafted toothbrushes until much later. Forget soft bristles and fluoride. Even the concept of a bristle was a foreign one. So how did medieval people attempt to clean their teeth? The answer is surprisingly varied and often a bit disconcerting. One common method involved the use of toothpicks, though these were far removed from the modern, disposable variety. These were typically twigs, sharpened slivers of bone, or even quills, anything readily available that could be used to dislodge food particles. Imagine the potential for splinters and gum irritation. The effectiveness was, at best, questionable, and the potential for introducing bacteria or infection was certainly high. For those who could afford it, there were more sophisticated, though still far from sanitary, approaches. Some historical texts mention the use of cloths or rags to wipe the teeth, perhaps dipped in water or some form of herbal rinse. However, the efficacy of such a method is questionable considering the limited understanding of germ theory. These cloths likely harbored more bacteria than they removed. Beyond simple cleaning, medieval individuals sometimes attempted to improve the aesthetics of their teeth. While whitening products were not readily available, some individuals might have employed abrasive substances such as pumice or ashes to scrub away stains. These methods, however, were likely to damage tooth enamel over time, leading to further dental problems. The most striking aspect of medieval oral hygiene, or lack thereof, is the almost complete absence of preventative measures. The idea of regular cleaning as a way to prevent disease was simply not part of the prevailing understanding. The causes of tooth decay and gum disease were poorly understood, often attributed to supernatural causes or imbalances in bodily humors. The result? Dental problems were rampant. Tooth decay, gum disease, and abscesses were exceedingly common among both rich and poor. Dental caries, cavities, were prevalent, leaving many with missing, decayed, or severely damaged teeth. The effects were more than merely cosmetic. Chronic oral infections could lead to systemic illnesses, contributing to overall poor health and shortened lifespans. Imagine a persistent toothache, lacking the relief modern dentistry can provide, alongside the other health challenges of medieval life. This grim reality is documented in a variety of sources. Skeletal remains from medieval sites offer stark visual evidence of widespread dental disease. Archaeological findings reveal a high incidence of tooth decay and abscesses, painting a sobering picture of the oral health of the population. While the remains don't provide direct insight into oral hygiene practices, they serve as powerful corroborating evidence for the lack of effective preventative measures. Furthermore, literary sources occasionally hint at dental issues. Though rarely the main focus, medieval writings sometimes allude to toothaches, lost teeth, or other oral ailments, providing anecdotal glimpses into the widespread suffering caused by poor dental health. Descriptions of characters in literary works sometimes mention missing teeth, reinforcing the reality of pervasive dental problems across the social strata. The stark contrast between medieval and modern oral hygiene practices is perhaps the most telling aspect of this story. Our understanding of dental health is vastly different, supported by advanced scientific knowledge, effective preventative measures, and readily available treatments. Daily brushing, flossing, and regular dental checkups are commonplace, preventing problems and providing prompt solutions to those that do arise. We possess an array of tools and techniques unimaginable to our medieval predecessors. The relatively simple act of brushing our teeth twice a day is a testament to how far we've come. However, it's crucial to avoid the easy trap of romanticizing the past. The challenges of medieval oral hygiene are not merely a quirky historical footnote. They highlight the significant impact of poor hygiene on overall health and well-being. The lack of understanding concerning infection control and preventative measures resulted in widespread suffering, emphasizing the importance of advancements in modern hygiene practices. Even the simple act of using a toothbrush and toothpaste is a monumental leap forward compared to the limited options and dire consequences faced by our medieval ancestors. The comparison extends beyond mere tools and techniques. It encompasses our vastly superior understanding of the human body, the role of bacteria in disease, and the importance of preventative care. The medieval approach, largely reactive and often based on superstition rather than scientific understanding, stands in stark contrast to our proactive and science-driven modern approach. In conclusion, the story of medieval oral hygiene is a testament to the significant challenges faced by individuals in a pre-modern society. The absence of effective tools and techniques, combined with a limited understanding of dental health, resulted in widespread oral problems with serious health implications. The contrast between medieval struggles and our modern practices underscores the remarkable advancements we've made in understanding and maintaining oral hygiene, ultimately improving the quality and longevity of human life. The next time you reach for your toothbrush, remember the gritted teeth and painful realities of medieval oral care. It's a stark reminder of how far we've progressed, and a powerful illustration of the simple luxuries that modern hygiene affords us. The sheer ease of access to dental care, preventative measures, and treatments today starkly contrasts with the struggles and limited understanding of our medieval predecessors. The transition from the rather grim reality of medieval dental hygiene to the equally unsettling topic of body lice might seem jarring, but both reveal a fundamental truth about the medieval world. Cleanliness, as we understand it, was a luxury, not a given, while the absence of effective toothbrushes speaks to a lack of understanding of oral health. The pervasive problem of body lice and other parasites illuminates a far broader challenge: the constant, unavoidable battle against infestations that were as much a part of daily life as eating or sleeping. Imagine a world where the comforting sensation of a clean, freshly laundered shirt was a rare, perhaps even unattainable treat for most, where the itchy, persistent crawl of lice was a familiar companion, a constant, unwelcome reminder of the physical realities of medieval life. This wasn't a matter of individual negligence. It was a systemic issue rooted in the limitations of technology, understanding, and societal structures. The prevalence of parasites like lice and fleas was not a matter of personal hygiene alone. It was a societal plague. Body lice, specifically Pediculus humanus corporis, thrived in the densely packed conditions common in medieval towns and villages. Clothing, often worn for extended periods without washing, provided the ideal breeding ground for these tiny creatures. The lack of readily available hot water and effective cleaning agents further exacerbated the problem. While soap existed, it was expensive and often not readily accessible to the majority of the population. Washing clothes was a laborious task, requiring access to water sources, fuel for heating water, and considerable time and effort, a luxury many simply couldn't afford. Even for the wealthy, the frequency of laundering would have been drastically lower than our modern standards. The clothing itself offered further challenges. Garments were frequently made from coarse materials like wool or linen, which provided ample spaces for lice to hide and reproduce. The intricate layering of clothing, particularly during colder months, created a warm, dark, and humid microclimate, perfect for parasitic proliferation. Under such conditions, an infestation was almost inevitable, regardless of social status. The social implications of a louse infestation were profound. Lice were not merely a nuisance, they were a visible marker of poverty and poor hygiene. An infestation could signify not only a lack of resources, but also a degree of social isolation or marginalization. Those who couldn't afford frequent laundering or who lacked access to effective pest control measures were far more likely to be plagued by infestations, leading to social stigma and potential exclusion from communities. While the image of a medieval lord scratching incessantly might seem humorous, the reality for many would have been far from amusing. The constant itching and irritation caused by lice could lead to secondary skin infections, further compromising health and well-being. The bites themselves could also transmit diseases, although the specific mechanisms were unknown at the time. The lack of understanding of germ theory meant that the connection between lice and disease was not fully recognized, yet the harmful effects were undeniable. So, how did medieval people attempt to combat these persistent pests? The methods employed were often crude, inefficient, and sometimes surprisingly inventive. One common approach was to use various powders to deter or kill lice. These powders included ashes, herbs, and even finely ground minerals. The effectiveness varied considerably, and the application could be messy and uncomfortable. The ingredients were often chosen based on folk remedies and traditional beliefs, rather than any sound scientific basis. Another method involved frequent combing. Fine-toothed combs, often made of bone or wood, were used to physically remove lice and their eggs or nits from hair and clothing. This required considerable time and effort, and the effectiveness again depended on the thoroughness of the combing and the quality of the comb itself. For those without access to fine combs, makeshift tools like twigs or sharpened pieces of bone would have been used, potentially leading to further irritation or injury. Mercurial ointments were also used, although their toxicity should not be overlooked. Mercury-based compounds were known to kill lice, but their use carried significant health risks. The long-term effects of exposure to mercury were poorly understood, leading to potential health consequences far outweighing any benefits from parasite removal. This highlights the constant trade-off medieval individuals faced between mitigating immediate discomfort and risking long-term health problems. The use of heat was another tactic. Exposure of clothing to direct sunlight or to high temperatures was thought to help kill lice. However, the effectiveness depended on the intensity and duration of the heat, and this method was impractical for many who lacked the means to create consistently high temperatures. Furthermore, the heat could damage clothing, further reducing the already limited wardrobe. Beyond these direct approaches, certain garments played a role in lice control. The use of tightly woven fabrics, while potentially less comfortable, could act as a barrier, impeding the movement and reproduction of lice. However, this was primarily a preventative measure, not a cure for an established infestation. The pervasive presence of lice and other parasites had a profound impact on all aspects of medieval life, from personal hygiene to social interactions. Their constant presence underscores the significant challenges faced by individuals in maintaining even a rudimentary level of cleanliness, offering a sobering counterpoint to the often romanticized image of the medieval period. The struggle against these persistent pests highlights the stark limitations of the era, the lack of effective tools and understanding, and the considerable impact of these seemingly minor inconveniences on daily life and long-term health. The prevalence of lice extended beyond the human body. Fleas were another common problem, infesting not only people, but also their animals, homes, and bedding. These infestations were also difficult to control, and their bites could transmit diseases such as the plague. The interconnectedness of the parasite problem is important to understand. Lice, fleas, and then other parasites were a constant threat, demanding a continuous cycle of control measures, even if those methods were often limited in their effectiveness. The pervasive nature of these pests further highlights the limitations of medieval hygiene practices and the vast difference between medieval and modern standards of cleanliness. The stark contrast between the medieval experience and our modern reality underscores the extraordinary progress made in public health and hygiene. The simple act of taking a shower, washing our clothes regularly, and utilizing effective pest control measures are luxuries hard to fully grasp without considering the constant struggle against parasites faced by our medieval ancestors. Their experiences offer a valuable perspective on the achievements of modern hygiene practices and the importance of continued efforts to improve public health worldwide. The eradication of widespread parasitic infestations is a monumental achievement, a stark reminder of how far we have come and the ongoing importance of maintaining these standards. Chapter 4: A Legacy of Cleanliness, or Lack Thereof. The relentless battle against parasites, as described earlier, wasn't the only hygiene challenge faced by medieval people. Their understanding of disease and cleanliness itself was profoundly different from our own, and this difference shaped their practices in profound ways. The transition to modern hygiene wasn't a sudden revolution, but a slow, uneven process driven by a confluence of factors: increased scientific understanding, technological innovations, and shifting social attitudes. The journey from lice-ridden tunics to the readily available soap and hot showers of the modern age is a fascinating story of human ingenuity and a testament to the power of scientific progress. One pivotal moment in this journey was the gradual acceptance of the germ theory of disease. While the ancients had some inkling that invisible agents might cause illness, the detailed understanding that bacteria and viruses were the culprits behind many diseases only emerged gradually, with significant contributions from scientists like Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch in the 19th century. Before this breakthrough, explanations for disease were often superstitious, blaming miasmas, bad air, imbalances in bodily humors, or divine punishment. The lack of a clear understanding of disease transmission hampered the development of effective hygiene practices. People didn't understand why cleanliness was important, only that certain smells and infestations were unpleasant and possibly correlated with illness. The medieval understanding of disease transmission, or rather the lack thereof, significantly influenced hygiene practices. The belief in miasmas, for instance, led to practices like the use of strong-smelling perfumes and incense to mask odors believed to cause disease. These scents, while failing to address the actual source of illness, offered a sense of psychological comfort and a misguided attempt at prevention. The pervasive belief in miasmas also influenced urban planning. The narrow, often unpaved streets of medieval towns, combined with the lack of proper waste disposal, created an environment ripe for the spread of disease. The stench itself was considered a symptom and a cause, not just a consequence of poor sanitation. The lack of readily available clean water was another major hurdle. Water sources were often contaminated, making the act of washing itself a potential risk. Many believed that frequent bathing weakened the body and made it more susceptible to disease, a belief which persisted for centuries. The notion that pores could be opened by water, allowing disease to enter the body, was widespread, fueling a preference for less frequent bathing. The annual bath for the wealthy, a rather sanitized notion often seen in popular culture, wasn't universal, even amongst the affluent. Cleanliness was a class-based ideal. The development of effective sanitation systems, like sewers and public water supplies, played a crucial role in improving public health. While rudimentary drainage systems existed in some larger cities During the medieval period, these systems were insufficient to deal with the volume of waste generated by a densely populated area. The construction of more advanced sewer systems during the 19th and 20th centuries significantly reduced the risk of waterborne diseases. This wasn't solely a technological triumph, it also required a shift in social attitudes and a commitment from governments and communities to invest in public infrastructure. The introduction of clean, piped water into homes represents a critical shift in attitudes and possibilities. The advent of modern soap making techniques further contributed to the improvement of hygiene. While soap was known in the ancient world and used to some extent in the medieval period, it was often crude, expensive, and its effectiveness limited. The development of more sophisticated soap making methods, especially the mass production of soap during the Industrial Revolution, made it more accessible and affordable to a wider segment of the population. This made regular washing, a critical component of modern hygiene, significantly more feasible. Alongside soap, the development of reliable detergents revolutionized the cleaning of clothing, making it easier to remove dirt, grime, and parasites from fabric. Technological innovations also revolutionized the production and distribution of clean water. The invention and widespread adoption of pumps, filters, and water purification methods dramatically increased access to clean drinking water, greatly reducing the risk of waterborne diseases. The development of efficient water systems and sanitation infrastructure allowed for consistent water access, transforming the mundane task of washing from a rare privilege to a daily practice. The availability of clean water drastically reduced the incidence of waterborne diseases, enabling a massive leap forward in hygiene and public health. The evolution of textiles and clothing further influenced hygiene practices. The development of more absorbent, easily washable fabrics made it easier to keep clothing clean and prevent the spread of parasites. The invention of the washing machine and dryer in the 20th century mechanized a once laborious task, allowing for more frequent washing and the elimination of many of the challenges associated with the cleansing of clothing. This seemingly simple change radically altered the frequency of clothing changes and dramatically reduced the spread of infectious diseases. Medical advancements, spurred by the germ theory, played a significant role in advancing hygiene practices. The understanding of disease transmission led to the development of effective treatments and preventative measures. Public health initiatives, such as vaccination programs, sanitation campaigns, and health education, became crucial in combating infectious diseases and improving overall hygiene standards. The integration of medical knowledge into public policy and community practices allowed for long-term health improvements. The establishment of robust public health infrastructure, including hospitals, clinics, and health departments, enabled the mass implementation of hygiene practices and dramatically improved the health and well-being of populations worldwide. The transition to modern hygiene was not simply a matter of technological advances. It also reflected a profound shift in social attitudes. The growing recognition of the link between hygiene and health led to change in social norms and behaviors. Public health campaigns played a pivotal role in educating people about the importance of cleanliness and its role in preventing the spread of disease. Changes in personal attitudes, from once accepting the inevitability of parasites and diseases to understanding the need to prevent infection, resulted in a widespread adoption of modern hygiene practices. This is a testament to the effectiveness of combining technological innovations with concerted public health campaigns. The changes that have occurred in the last century alone are astonishing, from the widespread eradication of many infectious diseases to the development of effective sanitation systems. We have witnessed an unprecedented improvement in global hygiene standards. The development of antibiotics and other medical advancements transformed our ability to fight infectious diseases, whereas the improvements in hygiene and sanitation are often overlooked. However, these advancements wouldn't have been possible without the crucial step of recognizing the importance of hygiene and developing the infrastructure to support it. The journey from the medieval world of persistent parasites and limited understanding of disease to our current era of advanced hygiene practices showcases the remarkable progress we have made. It's a story of scientific discovery, technological innovation, and profound societal shifts. The simple act of washing our hands, brushing our teeth, and showering regularly, actions we often take for granted, represents a monumental achievement in human history, a testament to the power of human ingenuity and perseverance in our ongoing quest for a cleaner, healthier world. The legacy of cleanliness, once a struggle for survival, is now a cornerstone of public health and personal well-being. This evolution underscores the enduring importance of continued research, innovation, and public health initiatives to maintain and improve hygiene standards globally, combating not only historical challenges, but also emerging health issues. The story of hygiene is far from over. It continues to evolve, driven by scientific advancement and a persistent commitment to public health. The murky world of medieval medicine, a fascinating blend of ancient wisdom, religious dogma, and sheer guesswork, played a crucial, albeit often misguided, role in shaping hygiene practices. While the idea of cleanliness existed, its interpretation differed wildly from our modern understanding. The absence of a robust scientific framework meant that disease prevention was often left to chance, superstition, or the whims of the local barber surgeon, a profession that often overlapped with dentistry and bloodletting. Consider the humoral theory, a dominant medical model of the time. This theory posited that the body contained four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and that disease resulted from an imbalance among them. Treatments, therefore, often focused on restoring this balance through practices like bloodletting, a rather drastic approach to achieving equilibrium, or inducing vomiting and purging. While not directly related to hygiene in the modern sense, these practices highlighted a general lack of understanding regarding the causes of illness, hindering any significant progress in effective hygiene strategies. The humoral theory didn't account for the role of microorganisms, leading to a missed opportunity to connect cleanliness with disease prevention. The understanding of contagion was equally primitive. While some individuals suspected that diseases could spread through contact, the mechanism remained mysterious. The absence of microscopes meant the invisible world of bacteria and viruses remained completely unknown. Consequently, efforts to prevent disease focused more on avoiding bad air, or miasmas, rather than addressing the actual microbial culprits. This explains the heavy reliance on perfumes and incense, not as hygiene agents, but as a desperate attempt to mask perceived disease causing smells. The irony, of course, is that these strongly scented substances often did little to prevent the spread of disease, but did create an environment of strong scents to overwhelm and mask the smells of rotting waste and disease, creating a very different kind of olfactory environment than one would expect in our modern world. The role of the church further complicated matters, while monasteries, particularly those of the Benedictine order, sometimes maintained higher standards of cleanliness than the wider population. Religious beliefs also contributed to misconceptions. For example, some interpretations of Scripture viewed the body as inherently sinful and unworthy of excessive care. This belief, coupled with the general lack of readily available water and soap, sometimes resulted in less frequent bathing than what we consider necessary today. Even among the affluent, baths were infrequent events, perhaps once or twice a year. While not necessarily a cause for disease directly, the lack of emphasis on cleanliness in religious thinking undoubtedly had an impact. The arrival of the Black Death in the 14th century dramatically highlighted the limitations of medieval hygiene practices. The plague, transmitted by fleas residing on rats, ravaged Europe with devastating consequences. While many understood that the disease was somehow contagious, the precise mechanism remained elusive. Quarantine measures were implemented, but often haphazardly, reflecting a lack of a complete understanding of disease transmission. The devastating toll of the plague, however, eventually fostered some small steps towards improvement. While it didn't lead to a revolution in hygiene overnight, the sheer terror and death caused by this pandemic prompted some to question existing beliefs and practices. The gradual shift towards a more scientific understanding of disease began during the Renaissance and the scientific revolution. The development of the microscope in the 17th century opened up a whole new world, allowing scientists to observe microorganisms for the first time. This marked a crucial turning point, setting the stage for the germ theory of disease. However, the acceptance of the germ theory was a gradual process, spanning centuries. It wasn't until the 19th century, with the work of scientists like Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch, that the role of bacteria and viruses in causing disease became definitively established. Pasteur's experiments on fermentation and germ theory demonstrated the link between microbes and disease, laying the foundation for the development of pasteurization and other preventative measures. Koch's postulates provided a scientific framework for determining the causal relationship between a specific microorganism and a particular disease, thereby contributing further to the credibility and understanding of germ theory. The acceptance of germ theory finally provided a scientific basis for understanding the importance of hygiene. Cleanliness was no longer just about aesthetics or avoiding bad smells. It became a vital tool in disease prevention. This shift in understanding led to a series of crucial changes in public health initiatives, a movement that dramatically altered the landscape of hygiene. Public health initiatives, in their nascent stages, slowly started to prioritize sanitation improvements, advocating for better sewage systems, clean water supplies, and the implementation of public health regulations. These initiatives represented a significant departure from the medieval approach, which often ignored the public's health needs as a collective. The development of public sanitation systems was a landmark achievement. Medieval cities were notoriously dirty, with sewage running in open gutters and waste accumulating in the streets. The construction of sewers and improved water management systems, starting in the 19th century, had a profound impact on public health. This wasn't a simple engineering task, but a complex undertaking requiring significant financial resources, careful planning, and a shift in public attitudes and support. The construction of effective sewage systems required overcoming significant logistical and financial challenges and the willingness of populations to invest in public health infrastructures. The impact of cleaner environments and decreased incidence of waterborne diseases was, in retrospect, immense. Furthermore, the advancements in soap making also played a significant role. While soap existed in medieval times, its production was limited and its quality often poor. The improvement of soap-making technology during the Industrial Revolution made soap more widely available and affordable, furthering the spread of personal hygiene practices. The improvements in technology and affordability meant that hygiene was no longer exclusively within the reach of the upper classes, but gradually made available to the larger masses. The mass production of soap made the routine and effective use of soap a realistic expectation for a wider section of society, contributing to a notable improvement in public health. The invention and dissemination of other cleaning agents, like detergents, also contributed to the hygiene revolution. These cleaning agents revolutionized laundry practices, making it easier to remove dirt and parasites from clothing, further enhancing the overall sanitation of daily life. Before the invention of reliable detergents, washing clothes involved lengthy and laborious efforts. The introduction of washing machines and dryers in the 20th century made the task even more efficient and readily accessible, further improving hygiene standards by allowing more frequent changes of clothes. The integration of medical knowledge into public health initiatives marked a crucial change. Vaccination campaigns, public health education, and the establishment of hospitals and health departments helped to implement hygiene practices effectively and reach a wider population. The widespread dissemination of knowledge about hygiene significantly impacted attitudes and behavior, facilitating the adoption of cleaner habits. Public health campaigns effectively convey the importance of personal hygiene and public sanitation, impacting overall standards significantly. In conclusion, the transformation from the often unsanitary conditions of the medieval era to the relatively clean environments of today is a testament to the power of scientific advancements, technological innovations, and effective public health initiatives. It's a story of slow progress, punctuated by moments of significant discovery and widespread societal shifts in attitudes and beliefs. The journey from a world where disease was often attributed to supernatural forces or humoral imbalances to one where we understand the role of microorganisms is a profound testament to the power of human inquiry and our persistent drive for a healthier world. The legacy of this transformation is an ongoing process, a continuous evolution in our quest for greater hygiene and public health. Our journey through the surprisingly pungent landscape of medieval hygiene has brought us to a stark contrast: the modern obsession with cleanliness. While the medieval world struggled with a rudimentary understanding of hygiene, often battling the stench of unwashed bodies and overflowing waste, we now live in an era where cleanliness is not merely a desirable trait, but a near religious imperative. This shift is undoubtedly a triumph of scientific advancement and public health initiatives. However, this triumph comes with its own set of complexities, a fascinating paradox of progress. The modern obsession with cleanliness is deeply ingrained in our societal fabric. We are bombarded with advertisements for antibacterial soaps, disinfectants, and cleaning products, promising protection from a myriad of unseen threats. The gleaming surfaces of our homes, our obsession with sterile environments, and our constant battle against germs speak volumes about our anxieties surrounding disease and contamination. This anxiety is, to a large extent, a legacy of the plagues and epidemics that ravaged past populations, a deep-seated cultural memory manifested in our meticulous cleaning routines. It's a reaction born from centuries of grappling with the unpredictable nature of disease, a subconscious effort to regain a sense of control over the invisible forces that threaten our well-being. This obsession manifests in countless ways. The prevalence of hand sanitizers, once a niche product, is now ubiquitous. We disinfect surfaces religiously, often several times a day. We engage in intricate cleaning rituals, meticulously scrubbing every nook and cranny of our homes, from bathroom tiles to kitchen counters. The rise of clean eating trends, with their focus on organic produce and avoidance of processed foods, reflects this broader societal emphasis on purity and freedom from contaminants. Even our clothing choices sometimes reflect this concern, with certain fabrics and cleaning methods favored for their perceived sanitary properties. This near obsessive focus on cleanliness has undeniably contributed to significant improvements in public health. The eradication of diseases like smallpox and polio stands as a testament to the effectiveness of hygiene practices, alongside advancements in medical treatments and vaccines. Improved sanitation infrastructure, clean water sources, and better waste management systems have drastically reduced the incidence of waterborne and other infectious diseases. The impact on infant mortality rates alone is a powerful testament to the profound public health benefits of our modern approach to hygiene. It has significantly reduced the burden of infectious disease, freeing up resources and allowing for population growth and economic development. However, the flip side of this success story reveals some unexpected consequences. The overuse of antibacterial products, for instance, has contributed to the rise of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Our constant war against microbes has inadvertently created a breeding ground for stronger, more resilient strains, making infections harder to treat. The ecological impact of our cleaning habits is also cause for concern. Many cleaning products contain harsh chemicals that pollute our water systems and harm wildlife. The excessive use of plastic packaging associated with these products adds to the growing problem of plastic pollution. Our meticulous efforts to maintain a sterile environment might ironically be contributing to environmental degradation on a scale unimaginable to our medieval predecessors. Furthermore, the modern obsession with cleanliness may have unintended consequences for our immune systems. The hygiene hypothesis suggests that our overly sanitized environments may be contributing to the rise of allergies and autoimmune diseases. By shielding ourselves from exposure to a diverse range of microbes, we may be preventing our immune systems from developing the necessary defenses against these common environmental triggers. This reduced exposure to microbes in early childhood might be leading to an overreactive immune system in adulthood. A crucial point to consider is the psychological impact of this relentless pursuit of cleanliness. While a clean environment is undeniably important for our physical well-being, an excessive focus on sterility can create anxiety and stress. The constant need to clean, sanitize, and disinfect can become overwhelming, consuming significant time and energy. This constant vigilance against germs can lead to an unhealthy level of worry and a distorted perception of risk. The pressure to maintain an impossibly high standard of cleanliness can be particularly detrimental to mental health. The irony, of course, is that this intense focus on cleanliness, intended to provide a sense of security and control, can actually contribute to feelings of anxiety and inadequacy. Therefore, striking a balance is crucial. While the benefits of modern hygiene practices are undeniable, we must acknowledge the potential downsides. A more nuanced approach is needed, one that values cleanliness without succumbing to obsessive compulsive behaviors. This involves using cleaning products judiciously, choosing eco-friendly options whenever possible, and fostering a healthier relationship with the microbial world around us. It means accepting a certain level of dirt and germs as a natural part of life, recognizing that complete sterility is not only unattainable but potentially harmful. The goal should not be to eliminate all microbes, but to maintain a healthy balance, fostering a clean environment without sacrificing our well-being or damaging the planet. In essence, the journey from the often unpleasant hygiene practices of the medieval period to the meticulous cleanliness of the modern world is a complex and multifaceted story. While we have undoubtedly made significant strides in disease prevention and public health, we must approach our obsession with cleanliness with a critical and balanced perspective. The path toward a healthier future lies not in the pursuit of absolute sterility, but in fostering a sustainable and healthy relationship with both our environment and the microbial world that surrounds us. The legacy of cleanliness, therefore, is not simply about the absence of dirt, but the mindful and responsible management of our environment and our own well-being. It is a continuing evolution, a constant negotiation between the desire for a healthy and safe environment and the awareness of unintended consequences, a dialogue between progress and prudence. The story, in short, is far from over. The stark contrast between medieval and modern approaches to hygiene offers a fascinating lens through which to examine societal values, technological advancements, and the very definition of cleanliness. While the medieval world grappled with the pervasive stench of unwashed bodies and overflowing latrines, our modern world, is characterized by a near-religious devotion to cleanliness, a veritable crusade against germs. But this seemingly straightforward dichotomy belies a complex reality, revealing intriguing parallels as well as profound differences. One striking similarity lies in the fundamental human desire to mitigate unpleasant odors. The medieval reliance on perfumes, fragrant oils, and strong-smelling herbs wasn't merely an attempt to mask body odor. It was a sophisticated, albeit crude, attempt to create a more pleasant sensory environment. This echoes our modern-day obsession with air fresheners, scented candles, and a myriad of other odor-eliminating products. While the specific techniques have evolved dramatically, the underlying motivation remains the same: a desire for a sensory experience unburdened by unpleasant smells. However, the reasons behind odor management differ significantly. Medieval reliance on perfume stemmed from a limited understanding of hygiene and disease transmission. The belief that frequent bathing weakened the body, coupled with limited access to clean water, meant that body odor was often unavoidable. Perfume became a practical solution, masking the inevitable rather than addressing the underlying issue. In contrast, our modern aversion to body odor stems from a sophisticated understanding of hygiene and its relationship to disease. We bathe frequently, use deodorants, and employ a range of products to ensure that our bodies remain clean and odor-free, not just for aesthetic reasons, but for health reasons. The act itself has transitioned from a rare and somewhat risky endeavor to a daily necessity. Consider, too, the disposal of waste. Medieval cities were notoriously filthy, with human and animal waste accumulating in the streets, a breeding ground for disease. While our modern sanitation systems are far from perfect, they represent a monumental leap forward in managing waste and protecting public health. The contrast is striking. Open sewers and overflowing dung heaps versus underground sewage systems and efficient waste removal services. This difference reflects not only advancements in technology and infrastructure, but also a fundamental shift in societal priorities. Cleanliness, once a luxury enjoyed only by the wealthy, has become a fundamental right, at least in developed nations, underpinned by governmental regulations and public health initiatives. Furthermore, our understanding of disease causation has fundamentally changed. The medieval world attributed illness to miasma, bad air, a theory that hampered effective disease control. The notion of invisible pathogens spreading disease was unheard of. In contrast, our modern understanding of microorganisms and their role in disease transmission underpins our obsession with cleanliness. Our constant battle against bacteria, viruses, and other pathogens is a direct result of this advanced knowledge. We wash our hands, sanitize surfaces, and take countless other precautions to prevent the spread of disease, actions completely unimaginable to our medieval counterparts. The medieval reliance on herbal remedies and religious rituals is a world away from our modern emphasis on scientific interventions, vaccines, and antibiotics. However, this triumph of science isn't without its drawbacks. The overuse of antibiotics has led to the rise of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, creating a formidable challenge for modern medicine. The ecological impact of our cleaning products is also a significant concern, with many containing chemicals harmful to the environment. Our quest for a completely sterile environment might ironically be contributing to larger scale environmental degradation. While the medieval world's issues arose from a lack of hygiene, our current struggles stem from an excess, a paradox of progress. Moreover, the psychological impact of our modern obsession with cleanliness demands attention. The pressure to maintain a spotless home and body can be incredibly stressful, leading to anxiety and even obsessive compulsive disorders. The constant bombardment of advertisements promoting antibacterial products reinforces this anxiety, suggesting that any imperfection in cleanliness represents a significant threat to health. This contrasts sharply with the medieval attitude toward cleanliness, which, while lacking in our understanding, did not carry the same psychological weight. The medieval individual lived within a context of ubiquitous dirt and filth. This did not mean they were oblivious to cleanliness, but the level of expectation and the consequences of failure to maintain it were different in scale. In conclusion, the comparison of medieval and modern hygiene practices reveals a fascinating interplay of similarities and differences. While both eras share a fundamental desire to mitigate unpleasant odors and maintain a semblance of cleanliness, the underlying reasons, methods, and consequences differ profoundly. The medieval world lacked the scientific knowledge to effectively combat disease, leading to a different approach. Our modern understanding of hygiene, while immensely beneficial, introduces new challenges, such as antibiotic resistance and the psychological pressures of maintaining an excessively clean environment. The journey from the often unsanitary conditions of the Middle Ages to our modern obsession with cleanliness highlights the transformative power of scientific advancement, while simultaneously cautioning against the potential downsides of an overly sanitized world. Striking a balance between cleanliness and a healthy respect for our environment and our own immune systems represents the true legacy of this ongoing evolution. The ideal isn't absolute sterility, but a mindful and sustainable approach to hygiene, acknowledging that progress continues to evolve and refine our understanding of clean. So, what can the surprisingly pungent world of medieval hygiene actually teach us? More than you might initially sniff at, I assure you. While the image of a medieval peasant, perpetually shrouded in a miasma of body odor and surrounded by overflowing refuse, might initially seem a distant and rather unpleasant historical curiosity, a closer examination reveals surprisingly relevant lessons for our own time. The past, as they say, isn't dead. It isn't even past. Firstly, the medieval experience underscores the critical importance of historical context. Judging the past by the standards of the present is not only unfair, but also profoundly unproductive. To scoff at the medieval reliance on perfumes to mask body odor, without understanding their limited access to clean water and their rudimentary understanding of disease transmission, is to miss the ingenuity and pragmatism of their approach. They worked with what they had, utilizing available resources to achieve the best outcome possible given their constraints. This should remind us to approach all historical periods with empathy and a deep understanding of their unique circumstances before passing judgment. we should attempt to understand their practical responses before judging their methods. Secondly, the medieval saga of hygiene highlights the dynamic interplay between technological advancements and societal attitudes. The evolution of hygiene is not a simple linear progression from ignorance to enlightenment. It's a complex interplay of scientific understanding, technological innovation, cultural norms, and economic factors. The lack of readily available clean water sources, along with the lack of understanding germ theory, severely limited the effectiveness of medieval approaches. The development of more sophisticated water management systems, better understanding disease transmission, and technological advances such as soap making had a profound impact on hygiene practices. Consider the simple act of bathing. While our modern world takes daily showers for granted, in the Middle Ages, bathing was a far more infrequent and often ritualistic affair. For many, it was a yearly event, often associated with religious festivals or specific times of the year. The belief that frequent bathing weakened the body, making individuals more susceptible to disease, stemmed from a very different understanding of health and the human body. This underscores how deeply rooted cultural beliefs and practices can impact even the most basic aspects of daily life. The simple act of bathing was bound up in an entirely different framework of understanding. This difference isn't simply a matter of ignorance versus knowledge. Even the very definition of cleanliness shifted across centuries. What constituted clean in the medieval worlds differed drastically from our modern standards. The absence of visible dirt and the mitigations of unpleasant smells were paramount, rather than the elimination of microscopic pathogens. This distinction reminds us that the concept of cleanliness is socially constructed and culturally influenced, shaped by the prevailing knowledge and beliefs of a particular society and time period. A medieval clean person would likely appall a modern one, but both acted according to the best standards available to them at the time. Moreover, the medieval experience reminds us that hygiene is not simply a matter of individual responsibility, but also of collective action. The filth of medieval cities wasn't simply the result of individual negligence. It was a consequence of inadequate sanitation systems, limited access to clean water, and a lack of effective waste management. This underscores the importance of public health initiatives and collective efforts to ensure proper sanitation and disease prevention. The medieval world's struggles with hygiene stemmed as much from infrastructural limitations as from individual practices. Our modern sanitation systems, though by no means perfect, represent a profound collective achievement in public health. Furthermore, the historical record provides a cautionary tale about the unintended consequences of technological advancement. While our modern understanding of hygiene has led to significant improvements in public health and life expectancy, it has also generated new challenges. The overuse of antibiotics, for instance, has led to the rise of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, necessitating new approaches to infection control. The widespread use of synthetic cleaning products has raised concerns about their impact on the environment and human health. The quest for absolute sterility, often promoted by aggressive marketing campaigns, creates the unintended consequence of undermining our immune systems and impacting the very microbial ecosystems which are essential to human health. The paradox of progress is evident here. The very advancements which have mitigated many of the threats to health in the past have created new ones, demanding a more nuanced and sustainable approach to hygiene and sanitation in the present. We've moved away from a world where unsanitary conditions were ubiquitous but also accepted, to one where, ironically, the quest for perfection in cleanliness presents its own set of health risks. The study of medieval hygiene also sheds light on the evolution of social attitudes towards cleanliness and disease. The medieval understanding of disease causation, often rooted in miasma theory, attributing illness to bad air, stands in stark contrast to our modern understanding of germ theory. This difference reflects not only a progression in scientific knowledge, but also a shift in societal values and priorities. The medieval perception of disease was profoundly affected by religious and superstitious beliefs, whereas our modern approach is largely based on scientific principles. Finally, the medieval experience underscores the enduring human desire for a pleasant, sensory environment. While the methods used may have differed dramatically, the fundamental motivation behind medieval perfume use and our modern use of air fresheners is the same: a desire to mitigate unpleasant odors and create a more aesthetically pleasing and comfortable surrounding. This seemingly simple desire reflects a deep-seated human need for a sensory experience that is free from discomfort and unpleasantness. The methods have changed, the technology has evolved, but the underlying human need remains constant. This timeless aspect of the human experience serves to bind the past and the present. In conclusion, the study of medieval hygiene practices offers far more than just a historical curiosity. It provides valuable lessons about the importance of historical context, the dynamic interplay between technology and societal values, the evolution of the concept of cleanliness itself, the challenges of progress, and the enduring human desire for a comfortable and sensory pleasing environment. It highlights the limitations of judging the past by the standards of the present and reinforces the significance of considering the historical, social, and cultural context in which past practices took place. The journey from the often unsanitary conditions of the Middle Ages to our modern, sometimes overly sanitized world is a testament to the transformative power of scientific advancement, technological innovation, and societal change. It's a journey marked by both remarkable progress and unexpected challenges, a journey that highlights the ongoing quest for cleanliness and the complex relationship between society, culture, and hygiene. The quest for cleanliness continues, informed by both the successes and failures of the past, prompting us to approach the future with a mindful appreciation for our history. After all, understanding the past is often the key to a cleaner, healthier future.